Warrior Lore. Chapter 3092. Contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, this time it wasn't as straightforward as before. After a while, four golden lights fell. In addition to the Buddhist light on the Kasaya, the nine-ringed monk staff, and the small golden bell, there was also a golden puppet in front of Xiao Hua. It seemed to be even more stingy than Xiao Hua. Many thanks, Buddha Lord. Xiao Hua was very happy. His greedy little plan was finally satisfied by this Buddha Lord. He hurriedly waved his hand and put away the Buddhist artifacts, as well as the golden puppet and the Buddha's Sarira projection that he didn't have time to check. Then, he took Zhang Luer out of the space, bowed and said, "This is the Bodhisattva who is fated with our Buddha. Buddha Lord, please be merciful and wake her up." Unexpectedly, as soon as Zhang Luer came out, a huge bell rang from outside the Tusita heaven. It was as if there was a big movement on Mount Meru. Not only did the Tusita heaven tremble, but even Mount Meru shook a little. Then, a strong golden light came out of the mirror behind the Buddha statue's head, enveloping Xiao Hua and Zhang Luer. The golden light was trembling extremely, as if the Buddha Lord was angry at Xiao Hua's insatiable greed. Then, a faint suction force came out of the golden light, and Xiao Hua and Zhang Luer's figures slowly fell into the mirror. That's right. At this time, Xiao Hua suddenly realized. Zhang Luer is practicing the Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra, not the Exquisite Leaf Sutra. I'm afraid the corresponding Buddha Lord is not this one, right? This bell should be to send Zhang Luer to another Buddha Lord, right? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua didn't resist the suction force. He pulled with his hand, and it was Zhang Luer's arm. When the two of them fell into the mirror at the same time, Xiao Hua's eyes darkened slightly. Then, countless thunderclaps sounded, and endless rain fell on his body. Io, what layer of sky is this? There's wind and rain? Xiao Hua was stunned. The golden light protecting his body involuntarily spread out, protecting Zhang Luer. But at this time, Xiao Hua was shocked again. Not good. On Mount Meru, how can I use the Tao sect's magic? At the same time, he had an extremely bad feeling in his heart. Sure enough, when Xiao Hua released his divine sense and saw the thousands of mountains around him, as well as the rolling thunderclouds and earth-shattering rain above the mountains, Xiao Hua's heart turned cold. Xiao Hua had already been sent out of the Buddhist sect ruins. How can this work? Xiao Hua is dumbfounded. This Xiao is going to the Buddhist ruins. Isn't it to wake Zhang Luer up? How can we go back empty-handed? Just now, was it this Zhao's greed that made the Buddha Lord angry? Thinking of his actions just now, Xiao Hua was very regretful. Almost without thinking, he hurriedly sent Zhang Luer into the space again. He released his Buddhist awareness, trying his best to find his location and the location of the reclining Buddha mountain so that he could enter the Buddhist sect again. He had already decided that this time, he would no longer take out any Buddhist tools or golden puppets. He wanted to take Zhang Luer out of the space and place her in front of the Buddha Lord. Unfortunately, the night was dark and the rain was heavy. Even with his Buddhist awareness, Xiao Hua couldn't find any trace of the reclining Buddha mountain in this unfamiliar place. This Xiao knows where the reclining Buddha mountain is. I just need to find a cultivator and ask, won't that be enough? Xiao Hua thought to himself. After roughly looking around, he hurriedly flew in a certain direction. An hour passed. Xiao Hua didn't see any figures, nor did he see anything else. In front of him, apart from the night, there was only the rain. The night seemed endless, and the rain also seemed endless. This made Xiao Hua's heart more and more anxious, and more uneasy. Kacha! Just as Xiao Hua was hurriedly flying away, a bolt of lightning as thick as the mouth of a bowl streaked across the sky, illuminating the dark night for several kilometers to the left. Xiao Hua's tall, thin, and anxious figure impressively appeared in midair. Xiao Hua? Two exceptionally surprised voices came from the edge of the light. Immediately after, two powerful divine senses rushed over like a wave, sweeping past Xiao Hua and immediately locking onto him. Who is it? Xiao Hua was originally feeling ashamed, angry, and regretful. He was about to use the lightning escape technique in this lightning, but unexpectedly, he heard a soft voice within the sound of thunder. At the same time, he was astonished, and at the same time, his divine sense swept out. Boom! When Xiao Hua's divine sense came into contact with the other party's seemingly solid divine sense, it was immediately repelled. Even Xiao Hua's mind was roaring. Nascent soul cultivator. Xiao Hua immediately understood his situation. Moreover, those two divine senses firmly locked onto him. How could there be any good things waiting for him? An incomparable fear immediately emerged from Xiao Hua's heart. Xiao Hua didn't even think about it. Lightning flashed around his body, and he immediately used the Imperial Thunder Guard, wanting to escape. Unfortunately, no matter how high Xiao Hua's cultivation was, no matter how fast his lightning escape technique was, he was now very close to the two nascent soul cultivators. The two nascent soul cultivators turned into rainbows a few li away, and at the same time, they rubbed their hands together. Countless silver rays fell into the air, and then disappeared. Xiao Hua had just urged his magic power, but he felt that the surrounding space was already imprisoned by magic power. It was the same as when he was imprisoned by the thousands of frost bamboo Buddha's divine sense in Jialan Temple. Granny, I just left the wolf's mouth and entered the tiger's den. Xiao Hua's teeth creaked as he anxiously thought, how can I live like this? Roar! Xiao Hua knew that in the face of two nascent soul cultivators, he couldn't have any slack. He roared to boost his courage and took out the wishful staff. The dragon transformation art and celestial body bestowment technique in his body began to revolve. His golden core was also agitated. True essence rushed into his meridians like a flood bursting a dam, and wisps of heaven and earth spiritual energy also poured into his body from the surface of his body. Open, Xiao Hua let out a roar. This full-strength staff really broke the imprisonment of the two nascent soul cultivators. Xiao Hua didn't even look back as he fled into the distance. He only flew a few zhang when a powerful force was born in front of him. It was like an incomparably tall giant wall blocking Xiao Hua's front. Xiao Hua crashed into it, and the brilliance of his whole body shone brightly. He couldn't move even half a step. Whoosh! A wisp of crimson spiritual fire flew out of Xiao Hua's mouth like a silk thread, and in a moment, it burned through the giant wall that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept out, and his body was like a gust of wind, passing through the spiritual fire and rushing into the distance. This Xiao Hua is indeed powerful. Needless to say, the two mid-nascent soul stage cultivators chasing after Xiao Hua were naturally Daoist Du Yi and Shan Shengzi. When Daoist Du Yi saw his spell being defeated, he was alarmed and said with some surprise, "Hehe, this is a nascent soul nameless." Shan Shengzi didn't find it strange, otherwise, our master wouldn't have let us take action. That's right. Daoist Du Yi nodded, but at the same time, he cried out in alarm. Not good, Daoist Shan Shengzi. Let's take turns casting magic. We must not let him use the lightning escape technique at full strength. This old man sees that his lightning escape technique is about to catch up to Master Qianlei. That's right, when we were discussing that day, this old man said that you know a secret technique that can restrict the lightning escape technique. Naturally, this old man will use it now. How can I let him escape from our hands? Shan Shengzi turned his hands slightly, as if he was twisting something, and said with a confident smile, in order to capture this guy, this old man specially recomprehended this technique. You won't let him escape easily? However, this guy's lightning escape technique is really beyond this old man's expectations. It can actually catch up to Master Qianlei. Of course, if not, do you think that Taoist Lei Ming of the Thunder Palace will be chasing after us? I'm afraid that he also knows that we are looking for Xiao Hua. As Shan Shengzi opened his mouth, a blood arrow fell into the air. As Shan Shengzi grabbed it with his hand, several spells were cast into it, and the blood arrow turned dark. Like a snake the size of a thumb, it rushed into the void and disappeared. Blood curse? Daoist Du Yi's heart trembled, and a trace of thoughtfulness appeared on his face. Alas, Shan Shengzi sighed. This old man has used up his profound qi to cast the secret technique, but I'm afraid that I can't do anything to Lei Ming anymore. Humph. Good luck, Lei Ming. Daoist Du Yi took a look at Xiao Hua, who was struggling in the distance, and said coldly, "If Xiaohua didn't suddenly appear here, we might have set up an ambush and killed him tonight. Since Xiaohua has already appeared, we don't have to meet him face to face." Xiaohua is now an abandoned disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect. Although Master Qian Lei wants to take back the punishment order, as long as Xiaohua falls into our hands, he will never be able to take it back. The Imperial Thunder sect will always be the laughingstock of others. That's true. Although Shan Shengzi's face was somewhat pale, the magic power in his body was rapidly surging. He looked at Xiaohua, who was about to approach, with some puzzlement, and said curiously, "This Xiaohua suddenly disappeared in Haoming City. He should have used some secret technique to disguise himself. We just guessed that he passed through Emojiao and Black Forest, but in Ming Kingdom, there is no trace of Xiaohua at all. We were like headless flies running around randomly. Tonight, how did he suddenly appear in front of us? Where did he go? What did he do there? It's really mysterious. There doesn't seem to be any secret area nearby." "Hee. Won't we know once we capture him?" Daoist He sneered, and then he didn't forget to remind Shan Shengzi, "After we capture Xiaohua, we have to discuss how to report to our respective masters." "Don't worry about this, fellow Daoist." Shan Shengzi smiled, and then said in astonishment, No." Just when Shan Shengzi and Daoist He thought that they had already captured Xiaohua, they saw the sword light around Xiaohua's body flourish, and a huge sword gradually appeared. The quagmire that Shan Shengzi used to trap Xiaohua was also defeated by Xiaohua. "This Xiaohua is really too powerful." Shan Shengzi blurted out, "If we give him another 100 years, we won't be his opponent even if we join hands." -11. Chapter 3093. Hee, what a pity. He won't have another 100 years. If you let him escape from our hands today, you and I would have cultivated to the middle nascent soul stage in vain. Taoist Master He sneered. In this distance of a few li, a middle nascent soul stage cultivator had enough means to trap a golden core stage cultivator. Even if he didn't release his nascent soul, Taoist Master He had already prepared the spell in his hand when Shan Shengzi cast the spell. At this time, he just waved his hand and a ray of golden light flew out. Tens of thousands of flowers grew near Xiaohua's sword. Every time the golden petals burst, they produced a powerful force, blasting Xiaohua's sword out of the giant sword. Wasn't this the method Xiaohua used to deal with the sword cultivators of the Huan country? The karma of this world was really unpleasant. At the same time these tens of thousands of flowers burst, wisps of ink-black blood appeared in the void. These wisps of blood were very difficult to detect. Along with the impact of these petals, they flew into Xiaohua's flickering sword light and quickly disappeared. It's really karma. This Xiao just came out of the Buddhist ruins and encountered such karma. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. The sword light around his body was still flickering. He was depressed in his heart and slowly turned around in midair. He calmly looked at the two nascent soul stage cultivators who were already close to him. At this point, what was the use of panicking? Xiaohua just couldn't figure out why these two nascent soul stage cultivators were making things difficult for him. Maybe it's that seal. Suddenly, Xiaohua's heart gave birth to a kind of intuition. It was as if the answer he had been looking for was now in front of him. He couldn't help but feel excited and nervous. Two martial ancestors. However, Xiaohua still pretended to be calm and asked loudly, "Why are you blocking this junior's path? Why do you want to escape when you see the two of us?" Taoist Master He and Shan Shengzi came together and said with a smile, "Martial ancestor, how do you know that this junior is Xiaohua?" Xiaohua looked at the two people and then looked at the place where he couldn't escape. Suddenly, he thought of something and the hand in front of his chest slightly withdrew. Terrifying Phoenix, nameless nascent soul, which one of them isn't famous in the three kingdoms of cultivation? Perfected He and Shan Shengzi had already closed in on Xiaohua. Xiaohua, who was only at the Golden Core realm and could barely resist an early-stage nascent soul realm cultivator, had already fallen into a desperate situation. Therefore, Shan Shengzi asked with a smile. Xiaohua's expression changed, and he said coldly, So the two grandmasters were spies from Huan country? Spy? Ha ha ha. Reverend Deity laughed and pointed his hand. The golden flowers rushed out behind Xiaohua, completely blocking his path. Junior doesn't know the two grandmasters. Xiaohua was very puzzled and asked curiously, Junior doesn't know why the two grandmasters. As he spoke, Xiaohua suddenly clasped his hand in front of his chest and muttered something. He raised his hand, and a faint green light flashed, instantly enveloping the surrounding area. Perfected Du Yi and Shan Shengzi were in it. Not good. The green light flashed past the two nascent soul realm cultivators, and they immediately sensed a very terrifying aura. While they knew that things weren't good, they hurriedly urged their magic power to protect themselves, and at the same time, they hurriedly separated and flew to Xiaohua's two sides. Unfortunately, even if the two were as strong as mid-stage nascent soul realm cultivators, it was too late to react. A clear GA sound was heard, and it was unusually loud in the night sky. From Xiaohua's hand, a huge phoenix phantom rushed out, as if it was reborn after nirvana. The green light that formed the phoenix phantom rolled up the endless spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and in an instant, it sucked out everything within a few miles. An indescribable imprisonment shrouded several miles. Wasn't this the phoenix illusion that Xiao Xinrui exchanged for with mid-grade spirit stones in Jinghua City? It was originally hidden in front of Xiaohua's chest, and even when he encountered 3 second-grade sword transformation realm swordsmen, he was not willing to take it out. Until today, Xiaohua no longer had any means to escape from the joint attack of the two mid-stage nascent soul realm cultivators. Xiaohua had no choice but to activate the phoenix illusion, which he regarded as a treasure, and recite the dozens of words to activate this rare Phoenix Jade Talisman. As expected of the Phoenix Jade Talisman, the cyan phoenix shadow completely covered Immortal Du Yi and Shan Shengzi. Within a few miles, the cyan light rotated rapidly, and in a moment, it turned into vortexes thinner than hair. In the middle of these vortexes was the void. The entire phoenix shadow pounced on the two cultivators at the middle stage of Yuanying realm, just like a real void storm. Seeing the terrifying destructive aura approaching, Perfected Du Yi and Shan Shengzi's expressions changed greatly. Without hesitation, they waved their hands, and a dozen or so magic treasures of various colors flew out from their storage pouches, each flashing with a strange brilliance and blocking in front of the two. Boom, boom, boom. Wherever the green light passed, the dozens of magic treasures were immediately riddled with holes and their brilliance immediately dimmed. The two of them hurriedly tried to fly up, but in the shadow of the phoenix, the two of them couldn't move at all. The two waved their hands almost at the same time, and the magic treasures that were destroyed exploded one after another. The impact of the explosion was very fierce, and it blocked a lot of the green light. However, after the magic treasures exploded, the green light still rushed into the two's protective brilliance. Almost at the same time, a colorful brilliance appeared above the two's heads, and two nascent souls emerged from the top of their heads. Each of them was holding a ring in their hands, but the two rings were different in color, one black and one white. The rings in the hands of the nascent souls were activated, and a black and white halo covered the two from top to bottom. After the halo fell, the two nascent souls looked a little dispirited, and at the same time, it disappeared into the two's bodies. CSI. The sound of a silkworm swallowing mulberry leaves sounded, and the void storm finally fell into the black and white halo. As the two expected, the black and white halo was immediately hit with a complete hole, and it was annihilated in a moment. Then the brilliance of the two shone brightly, and at the same time, it trembled rapidly. After a few breaths, the brilliance was annihilated. The two's figures seemed to have been seriously injured, and they fell from mid-air. Especially Shan Shengzi, there was black blood flowing out of his mouth and nose, and his face was abnormally pale. The two nascent soul middle-stage cultivators fell from mid-air, and the green light of the Phoenix Phantom also disappeared. Within a few miles, the mountains that were just washed by the rainstorm, the trees, and everything else disappeared. It was as if they had never existed, and a chasm of a few miles in size was born out of thin air. After the time to drink a cup of tea, Immortal Du, Yi and Shan Shengzi flew from the ground to midair again. After taking the elixir, the two's complexion had improved. However, under the Phoenix Jade Talisman, the corrosive power was far from being remedied by elixirs and meditation. They were afraid that they would have to work hard for dozens of days to recover. Damn this brat. Immortal Du, Yi swept out his spiritual sense, and when he saw that Xiao Hua had flown dozens of miles away, he couldn't help but scold angrily. I will capture him, and I will make him beg for death. Cough, cough. Shan Shengzi coughed twice, which was rare for him. The magic power around his body surged, and he reminded fellow Taoist Du, we'd better hurry up. That guy's thunder escape technique is very fast. If we delay for a moment, I'm afraid we can't catch up with him. Immortal Du, Yi said, and he also turned into a rainbow. Following Shan Shengzi into midair, he asked again, fellow Taoist, when will your secret technique take effect? There is still half an hour. Shan Shengzi replied after thinking for a while. Half an hour. Immortal Du, Yi smiled bitterly. In another half an hour, that guy's magic power will be exhausted. If he doesn't escape from our sight, he will fall into our hands. That guy. How can he fall into our hands so easily? Shan Shengzi sneered. In my opinion, even if it is 20 hours, I'm afraid it will not be easy for us to capture him. Immortal Du, Yi couldn't refute it. After all, they were close at hand just now. Two cultivators at the nascent soul middle stage couldn't capture Xiao Hua. Now that Xiao Hua had escaped far away, they really didn't know when they could catch up with him. You and I will split into two directions. Immortal Du, Yi glanced at the direction where Xiao Hua went and suggested, since his direction is the Kueha Sea, we will force him to fly to the depths of the Kueha Sea. When the spiritual power of heaven and earth is exhausted, he will fall into our hands. Yes, that should be the case. Shan Shengzi naturally had the same idea, but when they separated, he didn't forget to shout, fellow Taoist Du, Yi, even if you go to the Kueha Sea, you can't go too far. It's too dangerous inside. I know. How can we let him escape to the Kueha Sea? Immortal Du, Yi nodded. I don't believe that he has a second jade talisman. Immediately, the two of them chased after Xiao Hua from two sides. Just as Shan Shengzi said, within half an hour, Xiao Hua's speed surpassed the two of them. The distance between the three of them was getting bigger and bigger, but this distance was only about 200 miles, which was not beyond the range of the two's spiritual sense. However, after half an hour, Xiao Hua's flying speed gradually slowed down. The two of them were overjoyed when they saw this. They sped up and slowly closed the distance. Of course, although the distance was slowly closing, it took a long time. In a flash, several hours had passed and the sky was already bright. Damn it, what's going on? Xiao Hua felt that although the magic power in his body was still running smoothly, when the magic power was sent into the thunder escape, it always disappeared for no reason. The magic power that disappeared became more and more with the passage of time. By the fourth hour, nearly half of it had disappeared. This half was enough to drag Xiao Hua's thunder escape down a lot. From the very beginning, Xiao Hua's Buddhist sense could no longer detect the traces of Immortal Du, Yi, and Shan Shengzi. Now, the two of them appeared in the range of Xiao Hua's Buddhist sense. -11. Chapter 3094. Damn it, I'm really going to die. At this speed, I'm afraid it won't take more than a few days for them to catch up to me. These are two mid-nascent soul cultivators. How can I escape? Xiao Hua's battle with Taoist Jingyu in the past had benefited him greatly, so he came to a conclusion after a little thought. Taoist Jingyu was only an early nascent soul cultivator, while Taoist Du, Yi, and Shan Shengzi were mid-nascent soul cultivators, even close to late nascent soul cultivators. Moreover, although these two were not cultivators of Imperial Thunder Sect, they were proficient in flying techniques and were not much slower than Taoist Qianlazi of Imperial Thunder Sect. Although Xiao Hua's cultivation had improved a lot compared to the past, and his lightning escape technique was also much faster, it was extremely difficult to escape from the encirclement of these two people. Where is the front? Xiao Hua was somewhat impatient as he looked into the distance. There was a slight halo in the bright area. Why is it the direction of Kueha Sea? Xiao Hua raised his brows, and his heart sank. He couldn't help but hesitate. He always had a deep understanding of his sense of direction and luck, but he didn't expect that just after he used the Phoenix illusion, his luck would immediately turn bad. Going to Kueha Sea, that's a dead end. I must return to Shi country, or at least fly to Huan country. Xiao Hua's heart moved. Taking advantage of the fact that Daoist Du, Yi and Shan Shengzi were still some distance away from him, he hurriedly turned around and flew towards the north. If it was before, I could still escape back to Imperial Thunder Sect to hide. After flying for a while, Xiao Hua's heart was sad again. But now, I'm a lonely ghost. Where can I hide? Huan country. Yes, Million Ming Mountains. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. Imperial Thunder Sect abandoned me, so I naturally can't go back to ask for help. Now, I can only go to Million Ming Mountains. Didn't that Shaman King want to see me? Maybe it's because of this. This Shaman King's divine connection technique is really amazing. Of course, the premise is that I can escape from the pursuit of these two old nascent soul cultivators. However, as Xiao Hua flew, the consumption of his spiritual power became greater and greater. Even if he took medicinal pills and spiritual herbs, he couldn't make ends meet. Looking at the situation where Zhenrendu, Yi and the kind child chased after him, Xiao Hua was anxious. Under such circumstances, it was impossible for him to escape from Ming Kingdom, and it was even more impossible for him to go to Mount Million Ming. At this moment, an early nascent soul cultivator from the Imperial Thunder Sect flew over to where Xiao Hua was controlling the Phoenix illusion. He looked at the abnormality within a few kilometers and scanned the mess with his spiritual sense. He couldn't help but frown. This man was none other than Reverend Lei Ming, who had followed Reverend Du Yi and Shan Shengzi here. Strange. Aren't these two looking for Xiao Hua? Why did I encounter another enemy here? Lei Ming Zhenren thought to himself curiously. Could it be that they are looking for someone else and I guessed wrongly? In particular, what does Xiao Hua have that they covet? This doesn't make sense. Furthermore, the expulsion order from the Imperial Thunder Sect hasn't been issued yet. They are searching for my Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples so brazenly. Lei Ming Daoist really couldn't understand. However, when I came out from the Imperial Thunder Sect, I could still find traces of Xiao Hua, but when I was about to reach Haoming City, I couldn't find any traces of Xiao Hua. And I actually found out that other than me, there were two other mid-nascent soul cultivators looking for Xiao Hua's whereabouts. If these two people were looking for Xiao Hua, it didn't start when Xiao Hua left the Imperial Thunder Sect, but earlier? Thinking of this, Lei Ming Daoist suddenly understood. Yes, these two people must have noticed Xiao Hua long ago. They even knew that Xiao Hua was expelled from the Imperial Thunder Sect. That's why they dared to look for Xiao Hua so directly. As for the reason, it must be related to Xiao Hua's secret. Xiao Hua was an Qi refinement disciple, and now he has miraculously reached nascent soul. Furthermore, he has a disguise technique that is rarely seen in the Dawn Rain continent. This secret technique can even make dozens of illusory sword cultivators unable to distinguish him. Perhaps everything here is the result of Xiao Hua fighting against two mid-nascent soul cultivators? Thinking that Xiao Hua was actually able to fight against two mid-nascent soul cultivators, Lei Ming Daoist's heart trembled with fear. What kind of cultivation is this? Looking at the traces in the surroundings again, Lei Ming Daoist cast several spells in succession, then closed his eyes and pondered for a moment. He raised his eyes and looked in the direction of Xiao Hua's escape, and said in a low voice, Xiao Hua still can't stop two nascent soul cultivators. He should have escaped. However, Daoist Du Yi and Shan Shengzi are both mid-nascent soul cultivators. I am also not their match. However, if I go and send a message now and don't give chase, with Xiao Hua's lightning escape technique, I won't be able to catch up. Forget it. After a moment, Lei Ming Daoist made a decision. Similarly, thunder roared around him as he chased in the direction of Xiao Hua. I am also responsible for expelling Xiao Hua from the Imperial Thunder Sect. Even if I have to risk my life, I will give him a hand. Unfortunately, although Lei Ming Daoist wanted to help, his cultivation was still inferior to the two mid-nascent soul cultivators. Moreover, Xiao Hua had already changed his direction. When Lei Ming Daoist couldn't find the traces of the three people, Who knew where Xiao Hua had flown to when he used the secret technique again? Lei Meng Daoist, the palace lord of the Imperial Thunder Sect's Thunder Palace, was also a famous nascent soul cultivator in the Dawn continent. At this moment, it was actually difficult for him to intervene in the grudge between Xiao Hua, Daoist Du Yi, and Shan Shengzi. Facing the pursuit of two mid-nascent soul cultivators, Xiao Hua didn't dare to use the same strategy as before to escape from Daoist Jingru. He could only use his best lightning escape technique. Although the lightning attracted the attention of many cultivators, once they realized that there were two nascent soul cultivators chasing after Xiao Hua, they immediately retracted their divine sense, retracted their gazes, and hid their heads in their bosoms. Who would dare to pay attention to him? Poor Xiao Hua, for the past few days, he had thought of every method to expel the secret technique that Shan Shengzi used on him, and he was even more unable to shake off Daoist Du Yi and Shan Shengzi. At this moment, just like the beginning, he was chased to within 10 li by the two. If the two hadn't also been injured by the Phoenix illusion, if the two hadn't flown for several days and consumed a large amount of magic power, wouldn't they have already used their divine abilities to capture Xiao Hua? Hee. Xiao Hua, where do you think you're going? At this moment, the setting sun was like blood, and Daoist Du Yi's words were even more bloodthirsty. Xiao Hua opened his eyes wide and saw that below him was a verdant bamboo forest that was several mu in size. Countless bamboos swayed slowly with the evening wind, producing rustling sounds. At a glance, this bamboo forest was emerald green, very pleasing to the eye. However, at this moment, in Xiao Hua's eyes, the emerald green was so mournful, and a kind of heavy sorrow was born from his heart. Forget it. Xiao Hua's figure stopped, knowing that today's matter would not end well. With a wave of his hand, he took out the wishful staff, then covered his Taoist robe, and secretly took out the sword gourd of the execution spirit primordial light. This Xiao will fight here. If I can't win, this place will be this Xiao's burial ground. Xiao Hua faced the setting sun, looked in the direction of the Shi country in the west, and sighed. Hongxia, Shui, I'm afraid we won't be able to meet in this life. In the next life, this husband will take good care of you. Then Xiao Hua slowly activated his magic power. The side of his face was blood red, and the sword-like eyebrows that reached his temples also emitted a faint sword brilliance. Xiao Hua would rather die than live in integrity. He was absolutely unwilling to fall into their hands again. He was unwilling to be sealed again, and his memories destroyed. What? Not running anymore? Seeing this, Daoist Du Yi and Shan Shengzi also slowed down their flying speed, gradually approaching Xiao Hua from two directions to prevent Xiao Hua from escaping. Shan Shengzi asked coldly. No need. Xiao Hua sneered. In just a few days, the news of two nascent soul stage masters chasing after the terrifying phoenix will spread throughout the Dawn continent. This Xiao wants to know, how are you going to explain to the thousands of Dao sect cultivators? How are you going to explain to my Imperial Thunder sect? Hee, you have already been expelled from the Imperial Thunder sect. How can the Imperial Thunder sect stand up for you? Shan Shengzi sneered. Even if there are thousands of cultivators, do I need to explain to them? Daoist Du Yi also mocked. So, Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes, looking at the two people who had already fallen into the bamboo forest, and said calmly, You have already been paying attention to this Xiao. You have already started to track this Xiao. Then, the two layers of seals in this Xiao's body, is it also because of you? Hee. Daoist Du Yi and Shan Shengzi were startled, but they looked at each other and sneered at the same time. Maybe it's not you. Xiao Hua said faintly, You don't have such profound cultivation. I'm afraid it's because of your spirit-severing masters. What's the use of saying so much? Shan Shengzi had already scanned the area with his divine sense and sneered, There are no cultivators nearby. Even if you break the sky, what can you do? Who can know? Who said there is no one here? Suddenly, a faint voice sounded beside Shan Shengzi. Shui? When the voice entered his ears, Xiao Hua felt as if he was struck by lightning, and he looked at the place to his left in disbelief, which was the edge of the bamboo forest. The green bamboo forest flickered, and a very faint figure appeared. Wasn't it Shui? who was already in the late stage of foundation establishment. Why are you here? Xiao Hua hurriedly asked, and urged his magic power to fly closer to Xue Xue. Husband, you can fly to the depths of QC, you are not their opponent, but if you go all the way to the east, there will be a way out. Xue Xue's face was snow-white, and her eyes stared at Xiao Hua and said word by word. Her eyes were filled with attachment, reluctance, and endless affection. Hee, a foundation establishment girl? Taoist Master Du Yi was shocked, but when he saw that Xue Xue was only in the late stage of foundation establishment, he laughed again. If this old man is included? Behind Shan Shengzi, another voice that Xiao Hua was extremely familiar with strangely sounded. Ah! Xiao Hua was completely dumbfounded, Master. Of course, at the edge of the bamboo forest opposite Xue Xue, helplessness, whose hair was now pitch black and whose face was wrinkled, revealed himself. He was already a complete gold core cultivator. His pitch-black eyes were filled with anger. A teacher for a day, a father for life. Helplessness didn't even look at Xiao Hua and said faintly, although this old man didn't teach you anything, this old man regards you as his disciple. You will always be this old man's disciple. Are you all sick? Shan Shangzi faced helplessness, but he didn't seem to have any pressure. He clapped his hands, and the pressure above his head surged, and in an instant, helplessness was unable to move. Husband, farewell? Xue Xue took one last look at Xiao Hua, and her eyes were completely red. Then, a layer of blood mist appeared in her entire body. This blood mist turned into a strange figure in mid-air. It was somewhat similar to the Thunder Beast, but it was also different. It was the strange creature that rushed into Xue Xue's forehead in the Thunder Palace in the Misty Mountain that day. However, at that time, the strange creature was jade-black, but at this time, it was blood-red. With a loud boom, this blood mist suddenly exploded and covered Taoist Du. Wife. Xue Xue's self-explosion was too sudden, and it seemed that she had prepared for a long time. Xiao Hua was completely caught off guard. Seeing the blood mist gushing out, he cried out in sorrow. Taoist Du Yi frowned slightly, and his face actually showed impatience. He sneered and said, even if a foundation establishment girl self-explodes, what can you do? Immediately, Taoist Du Yi flicked his Taoist robe and used the hand of nascent soul to cover the rolling blood mist. Poor Xue Xue, who had been in seclusion for decades, had cultivated to the late stage of foundation establishment. Now, even if she wanted to die for Xiao Hua in exchange for Xiao Hua's life, it was impossible. Wife. Xiao Hua's heart was suddenly filled with tears. Almost without hesitation, he waved his hand, and the willow branch was taken out from the water bottle in the Buddha's saraira. He waved it towards the sky, and an inexplicable flow gushed out from Xiao Hua's body, just like when he summoned Kai Zhuoxia's soul in the Kai family of Lu Yang. A tin-colored glow that couldn't be seen by the naked eye, spiritual sense, and other mortal magical powers rushed out of the willow branch again and fell into the blood mist. However, at that time, Kai Zhuoxia's body was still broken, and now Xue Xue came, and there was no trace of blood left. Can Xue Xue still be saved? At this time, Xiao Hua's heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife. He finally understood the pain in the heart of Li Zongbao of the Utopia faction, and finally understood the most tragic parting in the world. Boom, at this time, next to the good child, helplessness also self-exploded, turning into a cloud of blood mist in the same shape and covered the good child. However, just like Xue Xue, although helplessness was a golden core cultivator, he had just stepped into the golden core stage, and the madness of his self-explosion was much stronger than Xue Xue's. However, the good child had long been prepared, and before helplessness self-exploded, he had already used a secret technique. Helplessness's body was flashing with green brilliance. The blood mist was rolling, and the golden core had turned into endless spiritual energy, but under the green light, it only showed a slight collapse. Even if the green light disappeared, the power of helplessness's self-explosion was much weaker, so how could it pose a threat to the good child? Master! Xiao Hua's heart twitched again. He didn't dare to imagine that helplessness, who was so disappointed in him, would sacrifice himself to save him. He also didn't hesitate to throw the willow branch again, and another ray of light rushed out and fell into another blood mist. Xiao Hua's face inexplicably turned pale. -11. Chapter 3095. The moment the willow light rushed into the blood mist, the green light of Shan Shengzi's secret technique finally collapsed. A few wisps of blood rushed out like arrows, instantly disappearing in midair. The place where they appeared again was the blood mist imprisoned by immortal Dube Yi Wu. A huge gust of wind blew, accompanied by the rumbling of thunder. Boom! A rather incomprehensible syllable was faintly discernible. It was extremely obscure and filled with the vicissitudes of life. This syllable, this thunder, this wind, Xiaohua was very familiar with it. It was what he heard in the misty mountain. And this sound was completely produced from the blood wisps, connecting helplessness and the blood mist transformed by Xue Xue. It was really strange. Not good. Whether it was immortal Du Yi or Shan Shengzi, they immediately felt that something was wrong. An indescribable palpitation arose from their hearts. But before they could do anything, there was a loud sound of boom. Two clouds of blood mist rushed through the imprisonment of the two cultivators in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm and quickly dispersed within a few meters. Immortal Du Yi didn't dare to hesitate. He hurriedly activated the golden light, protecting his body. Unfortunately, this blood mist was so strange that the golden light protecting Immortal Du Yi's body was immediately contaminated when it touched the blood mist. It quickly penetrated into Immortal Du Yi's body. Immortal Du Yi was shocked. While the spiritual power in his body was quickly activated, his thoughts turned quickly. He also hurriedly waved his hand gestures and displayed all the secret techniques he knew. Blood curse? Damn it! Shan Shengzi was also flashing with golden light. Unfortunately, his situation was the same as Immortal Du Yi. The blood mist was like the hatred of Xue Xue and helplessness. The golden light couldn't stop it at all and quickly penetrated it. Shan Shengzi was in a hurry. He hurriedly scanned with his spiritual thought. He immediately knew what this blood mist was, and he shouted angrily, "Blood curse?" Immortal Du Yi also understood when he heard it. He immediately stopped the secret technique, clapped his hand, and took out a jade bottle from the storage bag. He didn't open it at all. He squeezed his hand, and a green elixir fell into his mouth. From the strange appearance of Xue Xue and helplessness here to the two of them decided to self-destruct. Xiao Hua only had the time to wave the willow branch. At that moment, Xiao Hua's eyes turned red when he saw Shan Shengzi and perfected Du Yi appear in the blood mist again. Without thinking, he waved his hand, and the spirit-killing vital light came out of the space. He didn't even have time to send the willow in his hand into the space. He immediately activated the yin-yang sword gourd, and the green-red spirit-killing vital light rushed out and twisted towards the head of Immortal Du Yi. At the same time, Xiao Hua opened his mouth and a wisp of scarlet spirit fire rushed out. It didn't turn into a net of fire, but rather a spirit snake that flew towards Shan Zizhen's face. This was Xiao Hua's most powerful technique. Xiao Hua's magic power had already been consumed by a lot because of the blood curse. Taking a few Wucheng pills didn't have much of an effect. Although Xiao Hua had many methods, they all consumed a large amount of magic power, so Xiao Hua didn't dare to use them. The experience he gained from fighting with Daoist Jing Si made him realize that he absolutely couldn't allow these two middle nascent soul stage cultivators to get too close to him. He was merely an early nascent soul stage cultivator, and the difference between him and these two wasn't just a little bit. The spirit pills and spirit herbs he took now were only enough to maintain the lightning escape technique and keep up with the two nascent soul stage cultivators. These weren't even enough to rely on, so he was still caught up by the two nascent soul stage cultivators. As for the metal essence rich marrow and water essence ice essence in the space, they admittedly contained pure heaven and earth spiritual energy. However, Xiao Hua wasn't proficient in metal and water attribute cultivation methods. At this critical moment, how could he dare to casually try? If he wasn't careful, not to mention being captured by the two nascent soul stage cultivators, even his own meridians might not be able to withstand it. But at this time, for the sake of helplessness and for Xue Xue, he was already desperate. After he used these two techniques, he quickly thought of a way to deal with it. Unfortunately, before the spirit-killing vital light and spirit fire could get close to them, a multicolored light flashed above the heads of Taoist Du Yi and Shan Zizhen. Two nascent souls appeared above their heads, each holding a ring in their hands. However, at this time, the skin of the two nascent souls was also surrounded by a faint blood mist, which couldn't be easily dispelled. Shua. The two nascent souls activated the rings in their hands, and the black and white brilliance once again covered the two at the same time. However, the defensive effects of the two brilliances were different. Kacha. The spirit-killing vital light fell on the black brilliance, and pieces of brilliance were cut off. However, this brilliance seemed to be endless, and the spirit-killing vital light couldn't fall on the black brilliance. On the other hand, the red spirit fire easily penetrated the white brilliance and calmly rushed to Shang Huazong's body. Fellow Taoist, help me. Seeing that the spirit fire was so powerful, Shan Zizhen turned pale with fright. With a scream, the nascent soul threw the ring in his hand, and a strong wave came from the ring. The white brilliance that covered Shan Zizhen suddenly expanded like a cocoon, and the white brilliance spread in all directions like thousands of tentacles. Hearing Shan Zizhen's cry for help, Taoist Du Yi's nascent soul also threw the ring in his hand, and the black light around Taoist Du Yi spread in all directions like Shan Zizhen's white light. In just a breath's time, the black and white brilliance seemed to attract each other and rush together, and layers of indescribable shackles surged from the two's bodies. Shan Zizhen let out a long breath. Just now, he almost felt the tentacles of death touching his throat. At that critical moment, Shan Zizhen and Taoist Du Yi joined forces to create a shackle that blocked the attack of the spirit fire. Although this shackle couldn't completely block the spirit fire, and the spirit fire tenaciously burned the shackles layer by layer, under the urging of the two nascent souls, the shackles became more and more. It seemed that the spirit fire couldn't break through in a short time. Damn it! Kill. The virtuous child who was almost injured by Xiao Hua's spiritual fire. Now that he had a chance, he didn't hesitate in the slightest. The nascent soul's hands rubbed together, and one spell after another was cast out. Strands of brilliance fell into the air, and the void within several zhang of Xiao Hua's body actually produced a rumbling sound of vibration. In contrast, Taoist Du Yi's face was also ferocious. The nascent soul above his head waved his hand, and a 3-inch-long thin needle was born. The thin needle emitted an extremely brilliant brilliance, and a huge amount of heaven and earth spirit chi flocked together with the nascent soul spells. In the heaven and earth spirit chi, the thin needle not only didn't expand, but it became smaller and smaller, and the brilliant brilliance became weaker and weaker. Humph! Xiao Hua sneered. When he saw that the spirit-killing vital light and the spirit fire were ineffective, he immediately put away the spirit-killing vital light and the sword gourd. After the two released their nascent souls, he let Little Black and Little Yellow attack and catch them off guard. Unfortunately, Taoist Du Yi and Shan Zizhen's nascent souls were entangled in a bloody mist, so they didn't dare to stay for long, and Xiao Hua's plan fell through. However, seeing that the two were about to move again, Xiao Hua snorted coldly. A green light flashed between his eyebrows, and a group of green seal characters rushed out. Cryptic syllables that directly touched the heaven and earth spirit chi were released. Rumble. In the midst of lightning and thunder, countless heavenly thunder appeared out of thin air and bombarded the two nascent souls that were forming spells. Rise, who would have thought that the two nascent souls who were originally afraid of heavenly thunder didn't bat an eyelid. At the same time their hands formed spells, Shan Zizhen threw his hand, and a pitch-black pearl rushed into the air. Ziv, that pearl emitted a strong black silk, like a spider web extending into the sky. When the countless heavenly thunder touched the black silk, it was immediately drawn into the pearl and couldn't hit the nascent souls at all. Damn it! Xiao Hua gnashed his teeth. He almost wanted to take out that small bucket and throw it at the two nascent souls. Facing two incomparably powerful and well-prepared opponents, Xiao Hua was truly at a loss of what to do. Even if he wanted to take revenge for Xue Xue and his helplessness, he couldn't. Ka. A dry sound came from all around Xiaohua. Xiaohua immediately felt that his body was as heavy as 10,000 caddies. Not good. Xiaohua immediately understood that this was Shan Zizhen's nascent soul ability. In order to take revenge for Xue Xue, he had already fallen into the trap of the two nascent souls. In the midst of danger, Xiaohua's gaze fell on the willow branch in his hand that still hadn't been put into the space. His heart gave birth to a kind of extreme helplessness and at the same time, a kind of sadness. Since wife and master were able to ambush here without being discovered by me and the two nascent souls, they must have a premonition about this matter. Wife already said that I'm not their match, then I definitely can't kill them. I'll even be captured by them. But if I can't kill them, I really won't be able to vent my hatred. I'm unwilling. However, if I fight to the death with them here, I'll be letting wife and master down in vain, and I'll be letting down their deaths. Forget it, since wife's words are reasonable. Moreover, I have this strange willow branch in my hand. If Kaizhuaxia's soul can be preserved, wife and master will definitely have a chance to survive. Why should I be entangled with them here? For the resurrection of wife and master, for the sake of taking revenge for them in the future, I can only escape to the east, to the depths of the Kueha Sea. However, in the face of two nascent soul middle and late-stage cultivators, how could Xiaohua come and go as he pleased? He only had a plan. The surrounding space had been imprisoned by Shan Zizhen, and the thin needle in Daoist Yi's hand had disappeared. A kind of sharp needle pierced through the void toward Xiaohua's chest at an extremely fast speed. Ouch! At this critical moment, Daoist Yi and Shan Zizhen both exclaimed at the same time. The blood mist lingering around the two nascent souls suddenly flourished, and the two nascent souls' magical power suddenly went out of control. Kachacha, seeing such a rare flaw, it was also exchanged with Xue Xue's and Wu Yi's lives. How could Xiaohua dare to neglect? Hundreds of heavenly thunderbolts fell, breaking the imprisonment around his body. At the same time, with the help of the lightning, he sent the willow branch in his hand into the space and rushed toward the direction of the Kueha Sea at an extremely fast speed. Where are you going? Daoist Yi and Shan Zizhen's nascent souls flashed with brilliance and instantly suppressed the blood mist. Seeing Xiaohua escape again, they couldn't help but shout angrily. -11. Chapter 3096. As the two shouted angrily at the same time, the thin needle that had just disappeared suddenly appeared on Xiaohua's back. Xiaohua tried his best to fly a distance of more than 10 feet, but in the eyes of the two people, it was just a short distance. In particular, that kind child raised his hand again, and a big hand of several feet in size appeared out of thin air, covering Xiaohua's body. The space around Xiaohua immediately became as solid as a rock again. Xiaohua is in danger. At this critical moment, an indescribable and obscure wave came from the back of Xiaohua's head. This wave was like a breeze, like a bright moon, like a mountain, and like a river. Xiaohua's figure suddenly disappeared in this wave. The thin needle pierced the air. The big hand missed. Everything was void. Under that wave, Daoist Yi and the nascent soul of Kindchild were extremely excited. The Dao realm that hadn't improved for a long time shook violently, as if it was going to collapse and reform. The two people's faces were pale, and they looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Master, Tao of Heaven, Daoist Yi seemed to suddenly think of something, and a trace of red appeared on his pale face. This old man understands. Daoist Yi thought of it. How could the kind child not think of it? His eyes were wide open, and his face also showed excitement. Although this old man doesn't know the reason, it's obvious that capturing Xiaohua is not only beneficial to the nascent soul masters, but also to us nascent soul masters. Quick, let's chase after him. Today, we have already made a death feud with him. We must not let him escape. Daoist Yi hurriedly released his spiritual sense, but unfortunately, there was no trace within 100 miles. Guehihai. The kind child's tone revealed absolute joy, far from the calmness that a nascent soul cultivator should have. That girl said that there is a way out in Guehihai. She not only pointed out a way for Xiaohua to live, but also pointed out a way for Xiaohua to die. This old man wants to see how Xiaohua escapes to Guihe Hai. Even if he reaches Guihe Hai, who would dare to help Xiaohua? That's right, let's go. Daoistu, he also couldn't wait, and his figure turned into a rainbow, about to chase to Guihe Hai. But just as the magic power in his body surged, Daoistu, he shouted again, "Damn it! This girl's blood curse is really powerful." So what? Even if we can't match Xiaohua's flying speed, we have nascent souls in our bodies to support us. How could we not catch up to a cultivator who doesn't have a nascent soul in his body and only has nascent soul cultivation base? Shan Shengzi wasn't nervous at all. The two chased after Guihe Hai like shooting stars. Similarly, just like several decades ago, when Xiaohua waved the willow branch, it was still in the extreme west of the Dawn Rain continent. There was a boiling spring water, and a figure that looked like a human, but not a human, was immersed in a seven-colored halo of light. The situation had not changed in the slightest. With the appearance of the life force, the light shadow flew out of the spring and stopped a few hundred feet above the pool. The colorful halo rotated violently, and an emotionless, cold voice sounded again. "It really is Paramitha." That's right. Such an aura of rebirth could not be concealed in the mortal realm no matter what. I have not waited quietly for so many days in vain. Before the voice fell, a pair of wings that were several hundred feet long suddenly appeared in the colorful halo. The wings had many layers, but they were very transparent. At this moment, they were a bit clearer than before, but it was still impossible to tell how many layers there were. Moreover, the face of the light shadow was also blurry. It didn't have a mouth, nose, ears, or eyes, as if it was transparent glass. However, the face flickered with a holy brilliance, which covered the face. In this world, regardless of whether it was an immortal or a mortal, how could they not have a face? The wings flapped slightly, and the light shadow quickly flew forward, disappearing in the blink of an eye. When Xiaohua waved the willow branch for the second time, the light shadow in the extreme west had already flown thousands of miles away. Who is it? He actually dares to use Paramitha twice in a row? Could it be? At this point, the light shadow stopped and looked hesitantly to the east, not daring to move forward. It seemed that being able to use Paramitha once was already amazing, but using it twice made the light shadow afraid. After pausing for a moment, the light shadow suddenly moved. It flapped its wings and rushed to the east. Obviously, the light shadow had made a decision. However, after flying for tens of thousands of miles, the light shadow stopped again. A layer of ripples appeared on the holy face, like a mortal frowning. How is this possible? This is too unimaginable. The aura of Paramitha disappeared again. Who exactly is it? However, the light shadow did not give up like before. It flapped its wings again and flew to the east faster than a meteor. After flying for tens of thousands of miles, the light shadow stopped in the air again. Looking at the clear sky in the distance, it whispered, "This place. Why is there a natural restriction? That's not right, although this restriction is natural, but..." At this point, the light shadow's body moved slightly. Its head turned, and its wings gradually retracted into its body. Then, the light shadow flashed with a holy white light, and a beautiful woman with a serene expression appeared from the white light. On this woman's round, moon-like face, a pair of pitch-black eyes flashed with coldness. Her cherry lips seemed to be a little captivating. Her straight nose, coupled with her crescent-shaped black eyebrows, gave off an indescribable sense of tranquility. On her originally icy face, on the left side of her eyebrows, there was a red mole the size of a grain of rice. This was where the flaw was, but it gave the woman a kind of charm. That charm was faint, and not only did it make people not dare to blaspheme her, but it also made people who saw the woman's cold eyes feel a trace of warmth. The woman's appearance was very beautiful, and her clothes were even more strange. She wore a white gown that flashed with luster, and her long, beautiful hair was like a waterfall that draped over her back. The curls of her hair were the ripples of the water. The woman revealed herself and slightly turned around. A few hundred miles to her left, A man in brocade clothes flew over like the wind. The man's divine sense swept over the woman, and a shocked expression appeared on his face. He immediately flew to the woman's side. When he got closer, the man's handsome face was revealed. From afar, he bowed with a smile and said, "This little one is Du Peng. Greetings, fellow Taoist. May I know which sect this fellow Taoist is from? Or perhaps you're cultivating in seclusion on some celestial mountain. This little one has never seen you before. Your path is not my path. People with different paths cannot work together. There is no need to call me fellow Taoist." The woman's voice was extremely cold. "Oh?" Du Peng raised his eyebrows, but he was not angry. He smiled and said, "Then how should I address you? What are you doing here?" "My name is Zhang Jie." The woman coldly replied, "I'm waiting for you here. I want to ask you, where is the natural restriction? How do I pass through it?" "Zhang Jie?" Du Peng heard this and pondered for a while. Then, he smiled and said, "I'll let Miss Zhang know that the restriction is at the Wuming Mountains. This restriction is not easy to pass through." "Wuming Mountains?" The woman's expression did not change. Without waiting for Du Peng to finish, she asked again, "What about the other side of the mountains?" "Other than Wuming Mountains? That's the lost land of the Immortal Alliance." Du Peng rolled his eyes and answered. However, when he saw the woman's cold expression, he continued to show off. "I heard that that place was occupied by the Buddhist sect since ancient times. However, after the Buddhist sect was destroyed, it was abandoned by the Immortal Alliance of the Tao sect. By the way, although I'm not talented, I'm also a member of the Immortal Alliance. It's not convenient for me to reveal my background now. If Miss Zhang wants to pass through the Wuming Mountains, why don't you follow me? Perhaps I can help Miss Zhang find a shortcut." "Humph." The woman's pitch-black eyes glanced at Du Peng. She coldly said, "How dare you?" As the woman's cold gaze swept past him, a faint white light shot out from her body. It was like a white dove rushing towards Du Peng. Du Peng's graceful expression suddenly changed. He activated his dermic powers as if he wanted to dodge. However, before he could move, the white dove had already rushed into Du Peng's body. "Huh." A dry and hoarse sound came from Du Peng's body. Moreover, wisps of black gas not only came out from Du Peng's 7 apertures, but also from his skin under his Taoist robe. It gradually covered Du Peng. A vague, demonic figure was outlined in the black gas. "Humph." The woman coldly snorted. She seemed to be extremely annoyed. However, the expression on her face did not match her emotions. It was still cold and holy. She glanced towards the southwest. Then, the white light around her body rose again. She flew towards the east and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The woman named Zhang Jie left, but the black qi around Du Peng's body didn't stop surging. After half a cup of tea's time, the black qi around Du Peng's body gradually converged. Under the black gas, Du Peng's shocked and awed face was revealed. The jade-like appearance from before had already turned into a gust of wind. Who is this? Why does she have such a remarkable ability? This should not exist in the Immortal Alliance." Du Peng looked in the direction Zhang Jie disappeared and muttered in disbelief. According to her, she was waiting for me here? She wanted to ask me about the passage through Wuming Mountain Range? And she could actually see through me? Isn't Wuming Mountain Range hundreds of thousands of miles wide? She could actually see through the innate restriction that thousands of cultivators could not do anything about? But why have I never heard of such an extraordinary person? Du Peng thought of something again. He hurriedly released his spiritual sense and looked around inch by inch. There were still thousands of doubts in his heart. Why did she go to Wuming Mountain Range? If I ask her, she doesn't know anything about the Immortal Alliance. She doesn't even know about the Dawn Rain mainland or the Abandoned Land. But why did she go there? After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Du Peng withdrew his divine sense and returned to his previous calmness. His eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at the distant east where the sun had just risen. Suddenly, a trace of a smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. -11. Chapter 3097. However, the shock on Du Peng's face disappeared and was replaced by ecstasy. He even clapped his hands and said, "Ha ha ha, such a powerful being. Wouldn't it be easy for her to pass through Wu Ming? Since she can pass through, why can't I? Why can't my immortal union pass through? Diluo, oh Diluo, I want to see what you have done. How dare you kill my doppelganger?" While speaking, Du Peng didn't go to the east. Instead, he activated his magic power and flew away like a gust of wind. He also disappeared in a moment. After Du Peng had left for half a cup of tea, 1,000 miles to the southwest, which was the direction that the woman had looked at before she flew away, suddenly appeared on a black stone. A thing that was flashing with the light of animal skin came out of the black stone. A strange voice came from this thing that seemed to be both a human and a beast. Is this the human world? Is this the Dawn Rain continent? How come one is the saintess of the holy light world and the other is a devil general of the devil world? They have nothing to do with the world of cultivation? When did the Dawn Rain continent become so chaotic? After a while, this thing also wriggled and rushed into the sky. This bullshit immortal union doesn't have any trace of her. Then, she might really be in that lost place. I have to go and see. Don't let her escape. Otherwise, when my lord arrives, I will have to bear the consequences. While speaking, this thing also flew in the same direction as that so-called Zhang Jie of the holy light world. The root of all this seemed to be Xiao Hua's willow branch. At this moment, Xiao Hua was filled with unwillingness, helplessness, and anger. He carefully sent this willow branch, which carried the souls of the two people that he treasured the most, into the space. Originally, it was a normal action that he had done countless times, just taking something out of the space and sending it in. However, this time, it was completely different. The moment the willow twig entered the space, a black and white brilliance suddenly appeared from where the willow twig touched the space. Xiao Hua's mind still hadn't left the space. He only saw a flash in front of his eyes, and a black and white brilliance appeared. Then, the black and white brilliance separated into two. The black brilliance rushed into the sky, and the white brilliance rushed into the ground. Following this brilliance, there was another extremely obscure faint wave. This faint ripple was almost imperceptible. As the black brilliance spread throughout the entire space suddenly turned pitch black. Rumble. The entire space began to tremble violently at an extremely fast speed. Everything within the space began to tremble along with this trembling. It was unknown how long it had been. It seemed like an instant, but it also seemed like tens of thousands of years. During this process, the entire space seemed to have disappeared. Xiao Hua's mind also seemed to have disappeared. He was in a state that could not be described with words. The entire space lit up again. Xiao Hua's mind could clearly see that the white light that had rushed into the ground earlier had returned to the space. In contrast, the black light had rushed into the ground. What's going on? Xiao Hua's mind was greatly alarmed, because his mind had also been reflected by the black and white brilliance, and had also been swept by the nameless fluctuation. At this moment, his mind was also trembling along with the entire space. Although he didn't know what had happened, Xiao Hua's mind knew that the space was rapidly expanding. It was expanding outwards at an extremely fast speed, and the range was also extremely large. Moreover, at the top of the space, where the brilliance had originally come from, above the reverse light, the nameless thing that had originally surrounded the 10,000 Thunder Valley was now producing another brilliance. One after another, pairs of light spots appeared. After 6 pairs appeared, 3 independent light spots appeared in succession. These 15 light spots rapidly expanded as the space trembled. After a moment, the last 3 light spots that had appeared unexpectedly transformed into 3 blazing suns, and the 6 pairs of light spots that had appeared in front of them had transformed into 6 pairs of suns and moons. 9 suns. Immediately, the 9 suns violently trembled and rose into the sky from the reverse light. The 6 moons, however, flickered with a dark purple color and slowly descended. In addition to the reverse light, which was also like a blazing sun, there were actually 10 suns in Xiaohua space. Looking up at the suns, the heavenly Tao's starry sky had already hidden under the sunlight, but those specks of starlight had already become solid. The heavenly Tao had already removed the mysterious veil and transformed into a starry sky. Under the blazing sun, the previous hand of karma had also disappeared. However, Xiao Hua's mind could clearly sense that the hidden karma was still in this space, under the heavenly Tao. Looking down at the sky, countless mountains and rivers had already risen from the ground amidst the tremors. Countless rivers, swamps, and other landforms were also slowly forming in this vast sea and mulberry fields that could move mountains and overturn seas. A world that far surpassed the space that Xiao Hua had previously possessed was slowly forming. What exactly is going on? Xiao Hua's mind also expanded along with the expansion of the space. However, the greater the control of his mind, the more doubts he had. At this moment, the entire space had already expanded to a distance of 10,000 li. The tremors of the creation of heaven and earth had slowly disappeared, and the movements of the creation of mountains and seas had also gradually disappeared. The entire space regained its deathly stillness. Gigi. In this space that had never had any movement before, a low sound appeared. Oh? Xiao Hua's mind hurriedly retracted from the entire space. He saw that among the numerous spiritual herbs, a little horse-like thing was jumping around happily. Ganoderma? Isn't this the Ganoderma that I obtained outside the sword tomb? This thing seemed to have turned into a spiritual herb as soon as it entered the space. Xiao Hua was greatly shocked. How did it turn into a Ganoderma now? Mother, father, two timid voices sounded again. Goldie and Goldie actually flew up and landed right in front of Xiao Hua's mind. They seemed to have fear, but also seemed to have intimacy. And how are the two of you? Xiao Hua asked indifferently. His heart was still filled with deep sorrow. Boy is very good. He seemed to have just taken a bath and immediately became clear-headed. Goldie rushed to answer first. How can that be? Boy seems to have changed from inside to outside. Goldie did not show any weakness and hurriedly explained. Mother. Another timid voice sounded. Xiao Hua was very unfamiliar with this voice. Go to the side. Goldie's voice immediately sounded. It was very domineering. Can't you see that mother is busy here? Yes. Xiao Hua looked over. It was actually that little Silver who was very obediently following behind Goldie. Looking at the Ganoderma on the ground again, he saw that it was already lying in front of a spiritual herb that had grown for who knows how many years. That spiritual herb's stem and leaves flickered with a faint brilliance, and a white and fat little baby was slowly transforming. Father, how did you become like this? Just as Xiao Hua's mind was looking over, Goldie took the opportunity to ask again. Me? What did I become? Xiao Hua's mind usually did not have an image in the space, so when he heard this, he couldn't help but feel astonished. Father, take a look for yourself. Goldie immediately answered. However, when Xiao Hua looked towards the Yin-Yang pond, the water had already disappeared. Dai-Er, who was originally in the shape of a little duck, had now returned to the appearance of a little girl. She was sitting there cross-legged, as if she was meditating. You all can go now, Xiao Hua ordered indifferently. With a thought, his mind instantly appeared 1,000 miles away, at the location of another pond. See, when Xiao Hua saw the appearance of his mind, he couldn't help but be stunned. He saw that there wasn't a human figure on the surface of the water, but a sparkling and translucent jade archive that looked like a lotus. On the jade archive, 12 faint streams of purple qi were faintly discernible as they flowed, and it also looked like a lotus in full bloom. Where is fellow Taoist? Xiao Hua looked at it, but he didn't know why he had become like this. After thinking for a moment, he faintly reprimanded. Hee, greetings fellow Taoist. Xiao Hua's voice had just fallen when another Xiao Hua appeared in front of him. This Xiao Hua was precisely the wisp of primordial spirit that Xiao Hua had sent into the space to comprehend secret techniques, refine pills, and refine tools. At this time, his primordial spirit was already the size of a person. Although his body was somewhat ethereal and not substantial, Xiao Hua could clearly see that the humanoid core within the ethereal body had already solidified. The small humanoid figure was like the nascent soul of a Tao sect cultivator, with clear facial features. Moreover, the humanoid figure was wearing a Taoist robe with green patterns, which was exactly the same as Xiao Hua's Taoist robe. "AI, are you Xiao Hua, or am I Xiao Hua?" Xiao Hua sighed softly. "Fellow Taoist, you're crazy. You're Xiao Hua, and I'm also Xiao Hua." That Xiao Hua waved his hand, and a wisp of true samadhi fire appeared in his hand as he answered with a smile. "Do you know what's going on?" Xiao Hua asked helplessly. "You know everything I know, but I don't know what you know." That Xiao Hua faintly closed his hand, and the true samadhi fire disappeared. "It's just that you didn't carefully think about it. Speak quickly." Xiao Hua coldly said, "If the physical body outside is gone, you and I won't be able to live." "Don't worry," that Xiao Hua still smiled. "Right now, you and I are safe. Those two people won't be able to find you no matter what. The longer you stay here, the more likely you'll be able to escape this calamity." "I know." Xiao Hua naturally knew that if his mind stayed in the space, his other primordial spirits would temporarily control the physical body to fly away. No matter how long he stayed in the space, on the Dawn Rain continent, it might only be an instant. However, right now, his heart was filled with grief, so how could he be polite to this primordial spirit? The Tao of life and death. That Xiao Hua shook his head and showed off. Without life, there's no death. Without death, there's no life. Only when life and death coexist can one achieve the great Tao. Damn it, how could I have forgotten? Xiao Hua suddenly realized. Before, no soul had entered the space. Even the matter with Kai Zhuoxia that day was just a matter of using the willow branch to condense Kai Zhuoxia's soul. Kai Zhuoxia's soul didn't enter the space. At this time, Zhuoxia had no choice but to give up his life for him. He wanted to use the willow branch to save the two of them, but the two of them didn't have a physical body. If the willow branch was useful, their souls would naturally stay in the willow branch, or be captured by the willow branch. When the willow branch entered the space, it was the fusion of yin and yang. The great yin and great yang harmonized, giving birth to yin and yang, evolving life and death. Only then could this space have life. It was also because of this that before, this space only had light and yang. There was no darkness and no yin. All spiritual plants could grow, but all spiritual creatures couldn't live. There was no life. Since there was the Tao of life and death, he was currently on the yang side, which was also the place where all living things grew. Then what about Zhuoxia? Xiao Hua's heart trembled. He hurriedly waved his hand, and the willow branch fell into his hand. Sure enough, the willow branch was still a willow branch. There was no change. They should be on the yin side. Xiao Hua woke up again. The so-called netherworld lotus and netherworld bamboo from before should have been on the yin side that never showed up. Fellow Taoist, you've worked hard. Start refining the heaven-pacifying staff. Xiao Hua turned his head and ordered. He no longer paid attention to Xiao Hua, but a black brilliance appeared, and the jade-shaped Xiao Hua disappeared. Alas, my life is bitter. The green-robed Xiao Hua sighed. Looking at the direction Xiao Hua disappeared, he shrugged his shoulders and said helplessly, "You didn't even know that I haven't mastered the lightning-attracting technique? It's just that, how did you become so ugly? You look like a plate, but also like a lotus. Compared to my jade wind god, you're really lacking." Although the green-robed Xiao Hua's words were filled with emotion, his face was still wooden. Even his eyes didn't move. "Forget it. I'd better cultivate the lightning-attracting technique first." Immediately, the green-robed Xiao Hua's body flashed. A green light flew into the sky, right next to the strange magic tool. -11. Chapter 3098. Green-robed Xiao Hua's thoughts were naturally the same as Xiao Hua's thoughts. When Jade Archive Xiao Hua fell into a strange place, a black light flashed, and he became another Xiao Hua. The place where Jade Archive Xiao Hua was now was the same size as the yang side, and there were also 3 sun-like things hanging above his head. However, these things were emitting black light. What was strange was that Xiao Hua could see the black light, and this black light reflected the entire inside. Hiss! This is the netherworld sea of blood? With the help of the black light, Jade Archive Xiao Hua saw the inside, and he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. However, the yin side was completely different from the yang side. Most of the yang side was land, and although there was water, it wasn't much. Most of the space on the yin side was a sea of blood. Although there were waves in the sea of blood from time to time, the sea of blood was dead silent, and there weren't any underworld beasts. There was no sign of life. Looking at the center of the sea of blood, there were several floating pieces of land, and the netherworld lotus was growing on the largest piece of land. Shwe shwe. A very familiar feeling came from the netherworld lotus, and Jade Archive Xiaohua felt his heart ache. The sorrow that had been hidden by the huge changes in space could no longer be held back, and it suddenly burst out, drowning Xiaohua in an instant. Jade Archive Xiaohua could no longer observe the situation of the netherworld sea of blood, and with a thought, he landed on the netherworld lotus. At this time, the netherworld lotus was only the size of a thumb, and a layer of green light mixed with blood. There was also a trace of purple light that wrapped around the netherworld lotus that hadn't bloomed yet. The roots of the netherworld lotus were deeply embedded in the land, and it was precisely the netherworld sea under the land. Strands of blood and inexplicable things came out of the netherworld sea along the roots of the netherworld lotus, and were sent into the netherworld lotus's bud. Jade Archive Xiaohua's eyes were hot, and his nose was sour, but there were no tears. He already understood that Shwe Shwe's soul was sleeping in the netherworld lotus, and she was also the first soul of the yin side of the netherworld. It was her death that brought about the birth of the yin side of the netherworld. Perhaps when the nether lotus bloomed, Shwe Shwe would be reborn. At that time, Shwe Shwe might have been the ruler of the yin side of the netherworld. Shwe Shwe, since you treated me like this, I will definitely repay you 100-fold. The Jade Archive Xiaohua looked at the delicate netherworld lotus. Since I can't accompany you every day in the mortal world, I must accompany you for 10,000 years in the yin side of the netherworld. For 10,000 years. With that thought in mind, Jade Archive Xiaohua recklessly cast a secret technique, wanting to separate another strand of his primordial spirit. However, when he activated the secret technique, his entire mind flashed with a faint purple light. Not a single strand of his primordial spirit fell out. Why is this so? Jade Archive Xiaohua was extremely surprised in his heart. He carefully thought about it and knew that this secret technique was not wrong. If it wasn't for the fact that the primordial spirit could no longer be separated, then it would be the result of the spatial anomaly and the mental anomaly. Shwe Shwe. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. I'm afraid I can't fulfill my promise to you. At this moment, Jade Archive Xiaohua's heart was moved again. He raised his eyes to look at the other continents, and his figure flashed again. On another continent, there was a stone statue that looked completely different from Xiaohua standing in the center. The body of the stone statue was wrapped in a pitch-black flag. The pitch-black flag was very strange. Not only was the pitch-black brilliance flowing out of it, but the pitch-black brilliance of the moon was also absorbed into it. Zhang Xiaohua. Yes, my real name is Zhang Xiaohua. The appearance of this stone statue is my original appearance. Jade Archive Xiaohua's image slightly moved, and instantly turned into the appearance of the stone statue Zhang Xiaohua. However, it only took a moment for it to turn back into Xiaohua. The banner of Qiyu? This thing should be damaged. Jade Archive Xiaohua's gaze fell on the flag again, and he immediately thought of something. I'm afraid that because the yin side of the netherworld was opened, the power of death repaired this thing in the devil world. However, this stone statue seems to have a spirit. It's actually connected to my mind. In the future, it will be able to give birth to another me. Another real Zhang Xiaohua. Come, Jade Archive Xiaohua waved his hand, and the stone statue and the banner of Qiyu flew to the nether lotus. The banner of Qiyu wrapped around the stone statue and stood in front of the nether lotus like a guard. Shwe Shwe, my wife, my mind can't stay by your side. This stone statue is connected to my mind, and it's also my original appearance. It will replace me to guard you. When it can transform into a fetus, it will accompany you day and night, and nourish you every day. Then, Jade Archive Xiaohua stretched out his hand, pointed his index finger at the stone statue, and said indifferently, since it's my substitute, it will be considered as cultivation. Devil flames will refine my devil body. I can't become a devil, so you can become a devil. Boom! Devil flames emerged from the banner of Chiyu and surrounded the stone statue. The Devil Realm's flame refining technique circulated in the stone statue, and a ferocious expression appeared on the stone statue's face. Sai, Jade Archive Xiaohua looked at Xue Xue again and said with a wry smile, Xue Xue, you really hid it from me. You clearly knew that I was going to face this calamity and that you were going to fall, but you didn't tell me. While speaking, Jade Archive Xiaohua grabbed with his hand, but the place where his hand touched was empty. The pink jade slip he wanted was not in his hand. Oh, I understand now. Jade Archive Xiaohua was enlightened again. Things from the yang side can only be born from the yang side and can't appear from the yin side. Xue Xue, you can never appear in the Dawn Rain continent. Yes, if it was an ordinary soul, perhaps after being formed from the yin side of the netherworld, it would go through some kind of reincarnation to reach the yang side of the space again. Then, Jade Archive Xiaohua could bring her to the Dawn Rain continent. But the appearance of Xue Xue's soul caused the formation of the yin side of the netherworld and completed the entire world. She had already been closely integrated with the yin side of the netherworld, so how could she possibly leave this place? Yes, Xue Xue and Xiaohua had pledged their undying love to each other, and now it seemed that it was indeed so. As long as the space world was not destroyed, Xue Xue would not disappear. Xiaohua could naturally stay with Xue Xue forever. Not to mention 10,000 years, it was even possible for them to live as long as heaven and earth. Forget it. Jade Archive Xiaohua's heart was filled with complex feelings, and he sighed. Looking at the stone statue and the netherworld lotus that were destined to accompany each other for 10,000 years, he pointed at the netherworld lotus, wanting to put the ghost cultivation method into it, but then he stopped. The netherworld lotus was a natural spiritual object of the netherworld, and Xue Xue was the first wandering soul in this world. Wouldn't this understanding of the beginning of yin and yang be 10,000 times more profound than this ghost cultivation method? Jade Archive Xiaohua had no reason to do such a stupid thing like buying the casket and returning the pearl. Then, Jade Archive Xiaohua's figure disappeared again. When Jade Archive Xiaohua's figure appeared again, it was on another piece of land not far away. The netherworld bamboo and the netherworld lotus were inserted in the center, and the bamboo was like a lotus, entwined with green and blood-red light. At the same time, there was also a faint purple brilliance mixed in. At the same time, there were also traces of blood-red light coming from the netherworld sea into the netherworld bamboo. It was just that the purple brilliance was clearly much weaker than the netherworld lotus. Master, Jade Archive Xiaohua looked at the netherworld bamboo and the soul that was similarly sleeping helplessly and said with regret, this disciple is really unworthy. Not only did I not let you touch a trace of glory after becoming your disciple, but I also made you angry all day long. This disciple really did not want to make you angry, but this disciple really did not dare to say anything to you. Moreover, this disciple did not know how to say it. Although this disciple won face for you in the great battle of Tao and Sword, you were in seclusion. This disciple can imagine the scene when you came out of seclusion and heard that this disciple was expelled from the Imperial Thunder sect. However, this disciple really did not expect that you would be found here by Xue Xue as soon as you came out of seclusion. Although this disciple did not know what Xue Xue said to you and how you came here, but seeing your determination, and how you did not hesitate to sacrifice yourself for this disciple knows. Even if this disciple is unworthy, this disciple is still your disciple. This disciple will remember your words in his heart. A master for a day is a father for life. You will always be this disciple's benefactor. As long as there is a disciple who is willing to show filial piety, you can enjoy it. Master, people often say that bamboo has 7 virtues. Bamboo's figure is straight, and it would rather break than bend. It is upright. Although bamboo has bamboo joints, it does not stop. It is moving forward. It is straight and hollow. Its chest is like a valley. It is empty. Bamboo has flowers but does not bloom. It is plain and simple. Bamboo is aloof and independent. It is indomitable. It is outstanding. Although bamboo is outstanding, it is not like pine. It is kind. Bamboo is passed down through the ages. It is willing to work hard without complaint. It is responsible. Although you may not have such qualities when you were alive, after you died, you became the second soul on the inside of the netherworld and entered the netherworld bamboo. This disciple hopes that you will give birth to the 7 virtues, lead the souls, and achieve accomplishments that others cannot reach. This is also something that this disciple is willing to help Master achieve. Jade Archive Xiaohua said in a low voice, and then said, "As for Master's wife and Wuqing, you can rest assured. Although you have already severed your mortal fate with them the moment you self-destructed, this disciple will still take good care of them, and take good care of my 10,000 Thunder Valley." After looking at the netherworld bamboo, Xiaohua flew high into the sky. Within the 3 black suns, the power of death was constantly emitted, enveloping the entire inside of the netherworld. Xiaohua looked around and thought to himself, this inside of the netherworld is the same as the yang side above. Although I already feel that I can control it, there are still many mysteries of heaven and earth that have yet to be unlocked. Perhaps only as my cultivation increases can I slowly control the entire space, or even the world in the sky like the frost bamboo. With this thought, Jade Archive Xiaohua's body flashed with a white brilliance. His figure disappeared from the inside and appeared in the yang side. As soon as Jade Archive Xiaohua appeared, he immediately grabbed the pink jade slip in his hand. He really wanted to know why Shui appeared here, how Wuqing appeared here, and how they knew that he was in danger of being hunted down by a nascent soul cultivator. -11. Chapter 3099. At this time, Xiaohua was in his mind, so he didn't need to use any divine sense. The moment the jade slip touched his body, he immediately knew the contents. Sure enough, just as Shui had said before she died, the life and death restriction had collapsed the moment Shui's soul entered the space, leaving behind the words Shui wanted to say to Xiaohua. Husband, husband, allow this concubine to call you husband again. When husband sees this jade slip, this concubine will have already left husband, separated from husband by life and death. Husband doesn't need to be sad, and husband doesn't need to worry about this concubine anymore. This concubine already knew that this moment would come for me when I was in Kuei Sea. This concubine already knows that today's death is in your eyes. This concubine is just a passerby by husband's side, a meteor flashing in husband's gorgeous night sky. From the moment this concubine saw husband, this concubine's fate was already decided. Husband, this concubine knows that your love for this concubine is not as deep and passionate as Fairy Hongxia's. Even now, this concubine thinks that this love is too forced, and is the result of this concubine chasing husband. Thinking about the kind of pursuit I had for husband when I entered the Imperial Thunder sect, this concubine feels ashamed at this time. Husband has a weak temperament, and at that time, this concubine forced you to agree, but this concubine knows that in husband's heart, you may not have put yourself in the same position as Fairy Hongxia. Although this concubine usually hears husband call this concubine wife, this concubine always has a feeling that it is a joke, and an unrealistic feeling arises spontaneously. This concubine feels that I am a substitute for Fairy Hongxia, especially when this concubine is intimate with husband. This concubine really feels that what you see in husband's eyes is not the true feelings this concubine has for you. Husband, this concubine really wants to be your real wife for once, and not this kind of verbal nickname. This concubine knows that I can't compare to Fairy Hongxia, and this concubine has always been changing herself. However, this concubine is changing more and more, and is becoming less and less like herself. Moreover, this concubine feels that at this time, this concubine is simply too accommodating to husband, changing according to the concubine's imagination that husband wants a wife to change. To be honest, this concubine doesn't like this feeling. Do you know, husband, other than hiding some things from you, there are also some things that I don't dare to tell you. For example, foundation establishment. Actually, I could have reached foundation establishment long ago, but I didn't dare to do so. That's because I already sensed the tragedy that was about to befall me when I suffered qi deviation in Xuanlei Palace. Only by delaying my foundation establishment could I avoid the tragedy of death. Actually, it was just as you thought. These premonitions came from my bloodline. It was the bloodline of the lightning beast that could control heavenly lightning. That gave me such a shocking premonition. My parents had a premonition that I wouldn't be able to return, so they entrusted me to my uncle in the Misty Mountain. This is also something that this concubine has never told my husband. I remember when I was training in Tianmin Mountain, that ghost cultivator Huang, he wanted to kill me. Although everyone is afraid, this concubine isn't. This concubine knows that this might be this concubine's fate. This concubine won't be able to return safely from that experience. This concubine can't escape this fate. Therefore, this concubine was very calm and faced it calmly. I wonder if my husband and master still remember? Unfortunately, this concubine was wrong. That wasn't the end of this concubine's journey. Immediately after, this concubine and husband met the three elders of the ardent fire mountain. The love of the fire Qilin moved this concubine, but this concubine knows that this concubine doesn't love the fire Qilin. Even if this concubine doesn't love this concubine will follow Xiaohua. Even if this concubine becomes a moth flying into a flame, this concubine will still throw herself into that momentary light without hesitation. In the end, at the seaside where I was training, this concubine saw the scene of this concubine's death in front of my husband's eyes. This concubine has a kind of release, and this concubine also has a kind of gratification. This concubine can finally become the most dazzling star in my husband's starry sky. Even if I have to burn all my essence, this concubine is willing to illuminate my husband's entire night sky. Husband, I really want to call you this 10,000 times. I won't feel tired even if I call you again and again. Do you know? Husband, at the seaside where you used your hands to raise the dust and sand, you also took away this concubine's heart. Do you know what this concubine saw in your eyes? It was a river as dazzling as the stars, and this concubine was a drop in this river. This concubine saw the bamboo forest, the late-stage foundation establishment concubine, and the early-stage core formation concubine, martial uncle helplessness. This concubine also saw the two of us explode. At the same time, I also saw my husband's early-stage core formation cultivation. I also saw my husband's back as he fled in panic. Husband, from that moment onwards, this concubine knew that my husband was out of the ordinary. I also knew my own fate, as well as martial uncle helplessness's fate. All of this was unavoidable. For my extraordinary husband, this concubine is willing to sacrifice her ordinary self. Therefore, my husband, you don't need to be surprised by this concubine's appearance because this was already predestined. This concubine has been planning this ever since the seaside. As for martial uncle helplessness, it was also this concubine who invited him. Of course, this concubine still doesn't know how to invite martial uncle helplessness. However, this concubine knows that since this concubine appeared in front of my husband, martial uncle helplessness will also appear in front of my husband. He will definitely sacrifice himself for my husband. Then, this concubine will definitely invite him here. Even if I have to trick or coax him here, this concubine will still do it. For my husband, this concubine is willing to do anything, even if it means offending everyone in the world. Do you know, husband, when this concubine wrote this jade slip, her heart was tormented because all this concubine saw was you fleeing in panic. Then, this concubine and martial uncle helplessness self-explode. As for who was chasing after my husband and why, this concubine doesn't know. Therefore, aside from leaving this jade slip for my husband and believing in martial uncle helplessness, this concubine doesn't dare to believe in anyone else. This concubine won't tell anyone about this matter. This concubine can't ask anyone for help. This concubine would rather die for my husband. Because of this concubine doesn't dare to tell my husband. This concubine is afraid that if I do, the ending will change. Not only can this concubine not sacrifice herself for my husband's safety, my husband will also die in a place that this concubine doesn't know about. Therefore, this concubine carefully keeps this secret. Husband, don't blame this concubine for not telling you. Husband, this concubine knows that you're already crying right now. You are that soft-hearted, that kind of benevolence. Don't think about it anymore, don't care about it anymore. This concubine is just a fallen leaf that floats across the stream and disappears. The one that your husband wants to keep is your fairy Hong Xia. This concubine has never seen fairy Hong Xia, and I don't know what kind of character she has. However, this concubine will find a chance to explain this matter to her clearly. This concubine is that gentle breeze that blows past my husband's ear and her in that instant. Sigh, my husband, you've called this concubine wife countless times, but I don't know. Until now, has this concubine and my husband done any dual cultivation? If not, this concubine is very regretful. I can't truly be my husband's wife. But if you do, this concubine feels that it's a pity. Perhaps my husband will miss this concubine even more. Therefore, this concubine will slightly avoid you, so that this concubine's cultivation can leap to the peak of the late foundation establishment stage sooner. This concubine knows that if this concubine can save you, she must have the cultivation of the late foundation establishment stage. As long as this concubine's cultivation reaches the late foundation establishment stage, this concubine will definitely die for my husband. However, my husband, even if this concubine dies, this concubine will die for my husband. This concubine will not hesitate to cultivate with all her might. This concubine will also not hesitate to die. Others may cultivate to live, but this concubine cultivates to die for my husband. My husband, do you know? Perhaps if this concubine did not raise her cultivation, perhaps if this concubine did not go to this place, this concubine might not die. However, this concubine has been waiting here for a long time, waiting for this sad moment to arrive, waiting for my husband's hope of survival. This concubine wants to accompany you by your side for 10,000 years, but now, this concubine cannot. This concubine hopes that in the next life, this concubine will accompany my husband again. Shue shue. The jade archive Xiaohua let out a sorrowful cry. The entire space gave birth to sorrow. The sound of that space, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Dark clouds covered the sky, and specks of rain fell along with Xiaohua's emotions. Although the jade archive Xiaohua inside the space could not cry, this entire world was crying for Shue shue, for Shue shue's almost selfless true love, tears. At this moment, the jade archive Xiaohua shockingly discovered that the words Shue shue left in the jade slip were all true. They were engraved in his heart. Although Shue shue's words were somewhat incoherent, it was obvious that Shue shue had recorded them in a hurry twice. However, these words and sentences moved Xiaohua's heart. He really loved Shue shue passively. His love for Shue shue was not as deep as Fairy Hong Xia's. It was because of a kind of lonely love that he loved her. Or perhaps it was because of Shue shue's love for him that he loved Shue shue. This kind of love did not seem to come from the heart. It was only because he did not want to hurt Shue shue that he accepted Shue shue. However, it was this kind of unwillingness to hurt her that hurt her even more, resulting in the current tragedy. However, if he was asked to forget Shue shue now, then it was impossible. Even if there was no Shue shue's soul in the inside of the netherworld, no netherworld orchid, Xiaohua would definitely not forget Shue shue. As it turned out, love was planted in the hearts of the two when Shue shue was resentful. Love was so great, and love was so wonderful. I don't know what she would think if she knew about this and saw the jade slip that Shue shue left for her. Jade Archive Xiaohua held the pink jade slip in his hand and thought about what Fairy Hong Xia said when she left the Kai family in Luyang. The corner of his mouth seemed to reveal a sneer that was close to ridicule. Sometimes you feel that it is true love, but this love will change. Sometimes you feel that it is not love, but this love will also change. Who can tell the difference between true and false? Naturally, this Xiao will not be able to tell. Xiaohua waved his hand, and the pink jade slip disappeared. He then looked up at the sky. However, this Xiao is clear that since Shue shue said that this Xiao would definitely be able to escape if he headed east, then this Xiao will definitely be able to escape alive. In the future, this Xiao will be able to avenge her. Avenge Master. While speaking, Jade Archive Xiaohua's body flashed brilliantly and his mind left the space. Both Daoist Du, Yi and Shan Shengzi turned into rainbows and released their divine senses, thinking that they did not know when they would find traces of Xiaohua. However, after flying for a few dozen feet, Daoistu was suddenly stunned as if he had seen a ghost. He shouted, "Quick, fellow Daoist Shan Shengzi, 100 miles away. Xiaohua." Xiaohua actually appeared there. What? How is that possible? Hearing this, Shan Jizi was also shocked. He hurriedly scanned the place where Immortal Du said with his divine thoughts. Sure enough, Xiaohua's figure was really flashing with lightning in the air. He was trying his best to fly, and he seemed to have sensed their divine thoughts. Xiaohua turned back coldly, and his eyes were full of hatred. This is just a few breaths, right? Daoistu said very strangely, how could Xiaohua fly so far? And if this guy has this ability, why does he need to appear again? He just needs to fly to other places. How can we find him? Shan Shengzi's divine senses locked onto Xiaohua and said very strangely, fellow Daoist, look at his flying speed. It is obviously the same as before. There is no special change. Yes, the shadow that flashed just now did not appear at all at this time. If we were not also hit by the blood curse, we would be able to catch up quickly. Daoistu also replied. -11. Chapter 3100. I don't care. Chase. Since Shan had guessed his master's intention of capturing Xiaohua, how could he be willing to stop? After sending a voice transmission to perfected Du Yi, he activated his magic power and chased after Xiaohua. Unfortunately, just as Daoistu said, the two were now tainted by the blood curse, and their flying speed was also reduced. They were not much faster than Xiaohua. This distance of 100 miles was only enough for them to catch up with Xiaohua, but it was impossible for them to get closer. Of course, this 100 miles was also a relatively awkward distance, and they couldn't use some of their magical powers at will. Although their nascent souls could teleport to the left of Xiaohua, from the information they received, Xiaohua was good at physical cultivation and had great strength. Therefore, nascent soul attacks might not be the best method. Therefore, they would never use it easily until the most critical moment. In particular, their nascent souls were now tainted by the blood curse, so they didn't dare to use it casually. Not to mention Daoistu and Shan were shocked. Even Xiaohua himself was a little puzzled. His mind left the space, and the figure that disappeared because of the yin and yang in the space also appeared in the air. Before he could release his Buddhist awareness or spiritual thoughts, Daoistu's spiritual thoughts immediately arrived. Xiaohua released his Buddhist awareness and found that they had just flown out of the bamboo forest. Naturally, he was very surprised how he could fly so far in such a short time. Or after he left, what happened to Daoistu and Shan that made them chase after him now? However, Xiaohua didn't have time to think so much. He only looked back coldly at the two rainbow lights. With a wave of his hand, he took out the blood ring given by Zhang Qingxiao. After thinking for a while, he sent it into his body. Since the stone statue could cultivate the demonic fire, why couldn't his bloodline cultivate the demonic blood? Of course, he couldn't cut off a trace of his primordial spirit. However, Xiaohua didn't know the blood shadow technique. It was used to cultivate the blood drop paradise of the demon world. The demonic fire and black flame in the blood ring could be used. Run. Cultivate. Revenge. This was the purpose of Xiaohua's unscrupulous cultivation. Xiaohua and the two nascent soul cultivators chasing after him flew away, and the bamboo forest regained its tranquility. The rustling sound of bamboo leaves told this unforgettable story to the void. Unfortunately, no one heard it. Another 2 days passed, and a bolt of lightning streaked across the sky. It seemed to be heading northeast. However, just as the thunderbolt traveled several hundred feet, it suddenly came to a stop. Amidst the thunderbolt, Reverend Lei Ming's anxious, bewildered, and worried face could be seen. At this moment, Lei Ming Daoist was holding a strange-looking magic treasure in his hand. This magic treasure looked like a child's slingshot. It had a handle at the bottom and 2 forks on it. However, the right fork was exceptionally long and was shaped like a hook. It was slanted towards the other fork. At this moment, on the left fork, there was a slight scarlet light flickering. Here, looking at the magical treasure and the scarlet radiance, Thunder Tomb Reverend scanned the area within a few miles with his divine will. However, other than the mountain breeze, the bamboo forest, and some messy mountain rocks at the side, there was no sign of blood or corpses. Perhaps there are other Imperial Thunder Sect disciples fighting here. Looking at the seemingly undamaged surroundings, Thunder Tomb Reverend muttered, "If those two old farts were to surround Xiaohua here, wouldn't their battle be earth-shattering? Today, I only have one chance to use my secret technique. If I were to be schemed against, wouldn't I have to wait until tomorrow to find Xiaohua's whereabouts?" Immediately, Thunder Tomb Reverend flew up again. Looking down at the magic treasure in his hand that was gradually fading away, he sighed. Fortunately, Xiaohua's cultivation was not crippled. I can still rely on this item to find his weak aura, but where should I go to find him now? Thunder Tomb Reverend looked into the distance. This time, it's Huan country. Could it be that Xiaohua wants to lure those two nascent soul cultivators in front of the sword cultivators? Could it be the news from Senior Brother Miyu is true? Thinking of this, Thunder Tomb Reverend suddenly frowned. That's not right. If Xiaohua had ulterior motives, he wouldn't have met those two nascent soul cultivators here. Then, I can only continue to follow him to Huan country. But if Xiaohua didn't have ulterior motives, he might have been caught by those two nascent soul cultivators. Then, they might have to change direction. If Xiaohua was captured by those two old farts, his aura would definitely be blocked by them. Even if I had this item, I wouldn't be able to track him. Forget it. I'll have to use my secret technique again. If I miss something, I'll really regret it. As he spoke, Thunder Tablet, Spiritual Master, returned and tossed the magic treasure in his hand into the air. Immediately after, he formed hand seals and several lightning bolts struck the magic treasure. The entire magic treasure flashed with intense brilliance, and a layer of indistinct purple-red lightning slowly emerged between the two forks. Thunder Tomb Reverend then pointed his hand, and a drop of essence blood fell on the purple-red lightning. Pong! With a light sound, two balls of crimson lightning spurted out from the center of the magic treasure. This gave Thunder Tomb Reverend a fright, and he almost cried out, "What? Xiaohua has fallen." No, why are there two balls of blood? Could it be there's another Imperial Thunder Sect disciple? Thunder Tomb Reverend finally understood that this wasn't the place where Xiaohua had fallen. Perhaps it wasn't the place where Xiaohua had passed by. Instead, it was because two Imperial Thunder Sect disciples had fallen here that caused the magic treasure to react. Who could it be? Thunder Tomb Reverend was somewhat astonished. At the same time, he was somewhat hesitant. He might be able to use the secret technique of Imperial Thunder Sect to find out which disciple had fallen, but after all, he wasn't very confident. But if he were to use this secret technique, then he wouldn't be able to use it to find Xiaohua's whereabouts. Forget it. But after a moment of hesitation, Thunder Tomb Reverend clapped his hand and took out a Thunder Note talisman. After whispering a few words, he waved his hand and sent out a message. Better let the other disciples take a look. I'm here to save the face of my Imperial Thunder Sect. Even if 10 of my sect's disciples died, it's not as important as chasing Xiaohua back. It's been a long time now. Even if Sect Master didn't send out the expulsion order, those sects in Shi country should have received the news. Immediately, Thunder Tomb Reverend made a grabbing motion with his hand, and the two electric sparks were annihilated within the magic treasure. He then muttered some incantations and narrowed his eyes. After half a cup of tea's time, his eyes opened and flashed with an astonished expression. Looking up, he saw the direction where Xiaohua and the others had flown. Why are they heading towards Guihai? Why aren't they returning to Shi country? Thunder Tomb Reverend didn't understand at first, but then he sighed. Yes, Imperial Thunder Sect can't be returned. Huan country is also filled with wolves. If Xiaohua, this child, didn't go overseas, where else could he go? But who were these two Imperial Thunder Sect disciples who had fallen here? Did they meet Xiaohua and those two nascent soul-old ghosts? Although Thunder Tomb Reverend had doubts in his heart, he didn't dare to stay any longer. He hurriedly kept the magic treasure and once again activated the lightning escape technique to chase after them. As for Shueshua's helpless sacrifice, Thunder Tomb Reverend had no time to care about it. The sun had just risen. In the depths of Gui High, Xiaohua's body was surrounded by lightning as he flew above the calm sea surface. The sound of thunder was sometimes fast and sometimes slow, as if it was brewing an explosion. Xiaohua's current flying speed was much faster than 2 months ago, reaching the level of Imperial Thundershock. However, just 100 li behind him, Shan Zhengzi and Du Yi were still flanking him from the left and right, forcing Xiaohua to fly towards the unknown depths of Gui High. Xiaohua's flying speed had increased, and the blood curse of the two nascent soul cultivators had also weakened. Both sides were still in an extremely delicate balance. This balance had not been broken in the blink of an eye for 2 months. This Gui High, how can it be a place to escape? The more Xiaohua flew towards the sea, the thinner the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was, the more uncertain he became. In front of him was still the boundless sea and sky. No hope could be seen. In these 2 months, he had also encountered fierce winds and huge waves, and even some sea monsters. However, these were nothing in Xiaohua's eyes. In the eyes of those two nascent soul middle-stage cultivators, they were nothing. He was simply unable to increase the distance between them. At this time, Du Yi and Shan Zhengzi, in order to prevent the previous mistakes from happening, the distance between them was not short, forming a triangle with Xiaohua. Xiaohua, in addition to flying straight to the east, whether it was north or south, it was difficult for him to escape the attack range of either of them. Perhaps Shue's intention is to keep flying to the east. While flying, I can take advantage of the time to refine a suitable magic weapon? Xiaohua made some wild guesses. Then, he swept his Buddhist awareness and his mind entered the space. Xiaohua's spiritual sense and Buddhist sense were also rapidly growing along with the 10 times expansion of space. Although his spiritual sense could already reach more than 200 miles, and his Buddhist sense could reach more than 400 miles, but this growth trend didn't slow down and was still slowly growing. The inside of the space was already different from before. In the earliest area, Xiaohua had already laid down a restriction. That area had undergone the impact of the space's yin and yang. Whether it was the spiritual grass or the spiritual beasts that were incubating and growing, they were definitely different from other areas. Now, Xiaohua was planting spiritual grass in a new and vast area that he had opened up. The planting of spiritual grass now did not require Xiaohua's green-robed primordial spirit, let alone Xiaohua himself. In the place where the Ganoderma horse was previously lying, there was a spiritual wood that had transformed into a 2 qi tall little child. This little child was called Xiaoguo by Xiaohua. Since Xiaoguo was a spiritual wood that took human form, he was naturally gifted in planting spiritual grasses and taking care of them. He was several times faster than the green-robed Xiaohua and was even more nimble. As for the green-robed Xiaohua, Xiaohua was already clear in his heart. This guy had already experienced the green seal text in the heaven's ring of breath. 1 gave birth to 2, 2 gave birth to 3, and 3 gave birth to all things. Now, he had also experienced the yin and yang in the space. In the future, he might really become another great clone of himself. Of course, at this time, this guy could only make his own contribution in this space. 2 gave birth to 3, and 3 gave birth to all things. -11. Chapter 3101. Xiaohua's mind entered the space and instantly turned into a jade archive. However, this form only lasted for a moment before the jade archive turned back into Xiaohua's original appearance. Immediately, the jade archive Xiaohua raised his eyes to look at the 9 suns in the sky. His figure flashed and shot up into the sky. In the center of the sky, thunder rumbled. Meanwhile, the green-robed Xiaohua was tirelessly refining the material with lightning water. Fellow Taoist, how is this? The jade archive Xiaohua mysteriously appeared beside the green-robed Xiaohua and asked with a bow. Hey, fellow Taoist didn't see? It's still early. The green-robed Xiaohua didn't seem to be surprised when he saw the jade archive Xiaohua appear. He withdrew his hand and the lightning that filled the sky disappeared. The lightning water in the inexplicable object flowed back into tracing light. Then, he put his hands behind his back and sighed. I just refined the 5 elements planet disk and used it as the foundation for the heaven pacifying staff. With these 5 elements spiritual items, I can smoothly refine the heaven pacifying staff. However, this heaven pacifying staff, I'm afraid it won't be of any help to you. This thing can't hit the butt of a nascent soul cultivator. The green-robed Xiao Hua's tone was clear, but his face was still wooden and expressionless. Then, what good idea does fellow Taoist have? The Jade Archive Xiao Hua frowned. You know everything I know, and you know everything I don't know. You ask me, but who should I ask? The green-robed Xiao Hua seemed to be rolling his eyes. Nonsense, if I knew. Would I still need to ask you? The Jade Archive Xiao Hua said sternly. What idea do you have? Quickly say it. If I can't escape from 2 nascent soul cultivators, you can't live either. You don't have to be so fierce, right? The green-robed Xiao Hua shrunk his neck and pointed at an object under the scorching sun in the sky. I know you want to refine this object into the soul-punishing light. This object has been divided into yin and yang in this space, and now seems to have a trace of spiritual intelligence. If you want to refine it, you should start as soon as possible. If this object can freeze the primordial spirit of a nascent soul cultivator, I'm afraid it can really help you and me escape this calamity. Since you already knew, why didn't you do it? Xiao Hua grabbed the Jade Archive, and the 3-legged golden crow immediately appeared in his hand. Sure enough, the 3-legged golden crow's 2 eyes, one white and one black, vaguely had a divine luster. Xiao Hua looked at the Jade Archive, and it seemed as if there was a bottomless abyss in its eyes. He couldn't help but curse. If you don't open your mouth, who would dare to do it? The green-robed Xiao Hua argued. Let's not refine the sky-leveling staff for now. Let's refine the spirit-slaying vital light first. When Jade Archive Xiao Hua heard this, the corners of his mouth curled into a smile, and he said amiably, Don't tell me you don't know how to refine the soul-punishing origin light. Yes, of course. What you know, I basically know. What I don't know, I just have to look at it to understand. It's just that I haven't refined it before. The green-robed Xiao Hua naturally nodded his head and replied. After that, he made a grabbing motion, and the sword gourd fell into his hand as well. Sigh. Hurry up and refine it. The Jade Archive Xiao Hua sighed. You've comprehended more secret arts than I have. You're much stronger than me. This Xiao will start now. The green-robed Xiao Hua enjoyed Jade Archive Xiao Hua's praise very much. He took the 3-legged golden crow from Jade Archive Xiao Hua's hand, sat down cross-legged, and was about to start refining it. How's that child? Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked up again. At the edge of the extreme east, he had set up a restriction for Zhang Luer, and it was still there. There's no change. The green-robed Xiao Hua disagreed. He's like a dead person all day long. However, he's also experienced the separation of yin and yang, so he'll also be extraordinary. He won't die, so you don't have to worry. Not good. Just as Jade Archive Xiao Hua was about to say something, both the green-robed Xiao Hua and Jade Archive Xiao Hua shouted at the same time. Then, Jade Archive Xiao Hua's figure flashed, and he rushed out of the space. Damn it, these 2 old farts, what are they doing now? The green-robed Xiao Hua looked at the place where Jade Archive Xiao Hua disappeared, and he was very angry. Then, he looked at the soul-punishing origin light sword gourd in front of him and said fiercely, This Xiao will refine the soul-punishing origin light now, and kill you all one by one. Xiao Hua's mind returned to his physical body, and he immediately turned pale with fright when he scanned with his divine sense. When he entered the space just now, the 2 nascent soul cultivators were still more than 100 li away from him. In just a moment, they had already caught up to him within 50 li. Moreover, the 2's flying speed was still increasing. The blood curse that Xue Xuehe had planted on the 2 of them was actually dissolved by them. Not good, Xiao Hua hurriedly urged his magic power. Even though he had the dragon transformation art in his meridians, and also the celestial body bestowment technique, after 2 months of urging his true essence day and night, not only did his dantian have some stabbing pain, his meridians also had an intense discomfort. However, although the blood curse planted on Xiao Hua's body by the virtuous child had already been somewhat reduced, it was still very far away from being completely eliminated. Xiaohua really didn't know why nascent soul cultivators had so many secret techniques. Even the blood curse that Xue Xuehe and Wu Hai exchanged with their lives couldn't compare. What should I do now? While Xiaohua sped up his flight, his mind was in a mess. The panic that he had put away because of Xue Xuehe's prophecy before her death appeared again. Although the Buddhist sect Saraira has the ability to subdue demons, it's still not enough to deal with nascent soul cultivators. Soul cultivators, the power of lightning and thunder is still weak. Poor gold core frost bamboo can't even kill them. I've already tried it just now, unless I directly face a nascent soul cultivator. The spiritual fire has already been used once. Not only will they be on guard, but this Xiao's magic power is also not enough. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua's eyes lit up, and he secretly said, I'm afraid this is the only move. Maybe I can sneak attack a nascent soul cultivator. There's still one left, then it'll be easy. Immediately, Xiao Hua clenched his teeth and turned around to release his Buddhist sense, constantly observing the two nascent soul cultivators approaching. They seemed to be fleeing in panic. Seeing that Shan Shengzi and Daoist Du he had already approached within a few miles, the two nascent soul cultivators looked at each other and almost simultaneously slapped their foreheads with their hands, releasing the pressure of nascent soul cultivators. The most commonly used confinement technique of nascent soul cultivators, the nascent soul hand, was also displayed. Suddenly, two water blue hands dozens of feet in size condensed out of thin air, one from the left and one from the right, grabbing towards Xiao Hua's body. Although the big hands had not yet fallen, the sea that was originally filled with monstrous waves was calm within a few miles, and a faint whirlpool began to form under Xiao Hua's feet. Haha, the simplest method is the most effective method. Seeing that Xiao Hua's body was still unable to continue flowing lightning in midair, Daoist Du laughed. We thought too much of this guy. Even if he really has the strength of a nascent soul cultivator, he doesn't have the magical ability of a nascent soul cultivator. Exactly. Huh. Shan Shengzi was just about to answer when suddenly, the pressure of a nascent soul cultivator rushed out from the top of Xiao Hua's head. Moreover, with the appearance of this pressure, Xiao Hua's figure actually disappeared. Humph. Shan Shengzi sneered. He rubbed his hands, and thumb-sized water blue beads appeared within a few miles. Explode, Shan Shengzi coldly uttered an incantation. Rumble. The water surface and the air within a few miles shook violently, and the water beads within a few miles exploded at the same time. Even Shan Shengzi and Daoist Du activated their magic power and slightly retreated. In particular, Shan Shengzi grabbed with his hand, and the water silks within a few miles instantly flashed with a faint green light. Shan Shengzi pointed his left hand between his eyebrows, and layers of light overflowed from his eyes. Huh? Daoist Du was stunned. In his spiritual sense, there was no trace of Xiao Hua within a few miles. Daoist Du, be careful. Shan Shengzi suddenly shouted. Xiao Hua is. Hearing Shan Shengzi's shout, Daoist Du looked in Shan Shengzi's direction again. Before Shan Shengzi finished speaking, there was a faint sound of a sword. Suddenly, a brilliance flashed under Daoist Du's feet, and a few golden silks had already pierced into his protective brilliance, and those golden silks were like flying swords. Similarly, Xiao Hua's figure appeared under him at the same time, and the flying sword in his hand was precisely Qin Jian's golden silk invisible sword. Boom! The golden silk sword's sneak attack succeeded, piercing through Daoist Du's protective brilliance, and instantly piercing into his leg. With a burst of flesh and blood, Daoist Du, who was a nascent soul master, immediately turned into blood foam. Haha, Xiao Hua laughed, and then he didn't take back the flying sword at all. He opened his mouth, and even if his magic power was exhausted, he still wanted to spit out the spiritual fire. But at this moment, a great force was born from the top of Xiao Hua's head. Xiao Hua looked up, and a pale black, spiritual talisman appeared in midair like a whirlpool, and a strange binding force was emitted from that spiritual talisman. At this time, Shan Shengzi's ridicule also sounded, but he heard Shan Shengzi said coldly, the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Xiao Hua, you have used the demon realm's concealing technique once in Sentry City, Do you still want to use it today? Accept your fate. As Shan Shengzi pointed his finger, another pale white spiritual talisman appeared above Xiao Hua's head. This spiritual talisman also emitted a strange binding force, which was very tacit with the binding force of Taoist Yi's spiritual talisman, Yin Yang Seal. Xiao Hua's face changed instantly, and he finally found the answer to the two nascent soul middle-stage cultivators chasing after him. However, the sealing power of this spiritual talisman was so great, and the two seemed to have already set up a plan. Taoist he wanted to let Xiao Hua get close to him, even if his physical body was damaged. At this time, even though Xiao Hua tried his best to activate all his magical powers to break free, the spiritual talisman still fell like lightning, trapping Xiao Hua tightly. Forget it. Xiao Hua sighed. My cause came from this Yin Yang seal, and today's effect was also formed from this Yin Yang seal. At this time, even though Xiao Hua wanted to self-destruct, thinking of Zhang Luer, Xue Xue, Wu Ji, Xiao Huang, Xiao He, and the others, he couldn't. Ha ha ha, Taoist he waved his hand and was about to take Xiao Hua down. But suddenly, a strange change occurred. Roar? A roar like tens of thousands of bulls rose from under Xiao Hua's feet, and the whole sea seemed to be boiling, and countless bubbles surged from the depths of the sea. With the bubbles, a great binding force was also born in a radius of more than 10 feet. Good. Although Xiao Hua's body was sealed by two spiritual talismans, his five senses were still there, and he immediately understood when he saw this situation. Xue Xue. Xiao Hua's eyes were filled with tears. Needless to say, this was the chance of survival that Xue Xue mentioned before she died. However, this kind of binding force could even escape Xiao Hua, who was only at the Jindan stage at that time, let alone these two nascent soul stage cultivators. What's going on? Shan Shengzi and Taoist he obviously didn't encounter such a situation, and although they were stunned, they weren't too shocked. They looked at each other, and at the same time, their magic power surged, and their figures turned into a rainbow, trying to escape from this huge binding force. Boom! Just as the two of them urged their magic power, there was another deafening sound, and the sea water within a few miles suddenly collapsed, and a strong suction force was born from that binding force. Woo! A strong gust of wind sounded, and in the space within a few miles, whether it was the sea water or the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, they all sank in an instant. This kind of pressure from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was simply much greater than the weight of the entire mountain. Taoist Yi and Shan Shengzi, the two nascent soul stage cultivators, were caught off guard, and the brilliance of their bodies was annihilated, and with the huge amount of spiritual energy of heaven and earth, they directly sank more than 10 feet. What's going on? Shan Shengzi and Taoist Yi looked down in disbelief. The seawater within a few miles of the entire Qianhe Sea collapsed and rushed straight to the bottom of the sea, as if a big hole had leaked out of the whole sea, and the seawater leaked out from the big hole. They couldn't help but be stunned. -11. Chapter 3102. Things seem to be more than that. Just as Immortal Du Yi and Shan Zishan stabilized their bodies, they immediately activated their spiritual power and prepared to fly into the sky. Roar! A series of loud noises came out of nowhere, covering dozens of miles of space. Except for the seawater that had leaked within a few miles, the outer dozens of miles of seawater collapsed one after another. It was as if the entire Kueha Sea was about to fall into the bottom of the sea. Let's go. Although Shan Zishan didn't know what was going on, he was already terrified when he saw that the strange power of heaven and earth was so strong. He no longer cared about Xiao Hua and Immortal Du Yi who had lost a leg. With a roar, his body flashed with light, and he flew desperately to the north. Woo-woo-woo. Seeing this, Immortal Du Yi hurriedly activated his spiritual power and wanted to follow Shan Zishan. Unfortunately, they only flew for a few miles, and the entire space rang with a strange sound, like the cry of ghosts and howling of wolves, and also like the tide of thousands of beasts. An inverted hole that was almost 100 miles wide appeared on the surface of the sea. This huge funnel rotated crazily, and the previous confinement force and suction force instantly increased by almost 10 times. This force was beyond the imagination of the two nascent soul cultivators. It was like a pair of hands that were 100 miles wide had covered the two of them, and it was twisting with all its strength. It wanted to tear the two of them into pieces. This big hand completely froze the true essence of the two people, and they couldn't mobilize it at all. Rule power? How is this possible? Seeing this terrifying force, Shan Zishan's face changed greatly, and he cried out involuntarily. At the same time, his body and everything in front of him spun like a top, and he quickly rushed to the bottom of the sea. Seeing that he was rushing to the bottom of the sea without any strength, Shan Zishan didn't dare to hesitate anymore. He knew very well that if he couldn't rush out of this confinement before the change of heaven and earth, he was afraid that he would really be left at the bottom of the Kueha Sea. Therefore, Shan Shengzi clenched his teeth and slapped his forehead. A nascent soul that looked exactly like Shan Shengzi flew out. This nascent soul was no longer covered in blood mist. The moment it appeared, it waved the black ring in its hand and disappeared from Shan Shengzi's head. The benevolent child didn't even want his own physical body. He only wanted to use his nascent soul to teleport and seize a chance of survival from the power of heaven and earth. Seeing that Shan Shengzi had desperately used his nascent soul to teleport away, Immortal Du Yi looked at Xiao Hua, who had a strange smile on his face, in his hand. He didn't care about doing anything else. He gritted his teeth and slapped his head. A nascent soul that was half a head taller than Shan Shengzi's nascent soul also appeared. It also activated the white ring in its hand, ignoring its physical body and Xiao Hua, who was imprisoned, and disappeared in an instant. Hee, my wife is indeed scheming. Xiao Hua's figure fell rapidly with the whirlpool. Everything in front of him became an illusion. Looking at Immortal Du Yi and Shan Shengzi's slightly closed eyes and body that had lost their nascent souls, he thought with a smile, I finally escaped from their hands. But is there any way out at the bottom of the Kueha Sea? While Xiao Hua was thinking, thousands of buzzing sounds sounded. It was the sound that Xiao Hua encountered in the Kueha Sea that day. Xiao Hua's head was in a daze. It was as if his primordial spirit was about to be shaken out of his body by this buzzing sound. Fortunately, Xiao Hua's spiritual power was confined by the yin and yang talisman, so it didn't disperse. However, the golden core in his dantian shook violently with the buzzing sound. The layer of golden qi outside the golden core disappeared. The golden core and thunder core also turned into specks of light and began to dissipate. Xiao Hua was extremely shocked. Unfortunately, he didn't have the strength. He could only quietly wait for the final judgment of the power of heaven and earth. If he could escape with his life, so what if he didn't have cultivation? It was better than two nascent soul cultivators without a body, right? Shua. Suddenly, Xiao Hua's ears became quiet. All the sounds disappeared again. Then, as if the big hand pressed down hard, Xiao Hua's figure instantly fell 1,000 feet or even 1,000 feet. The light in front of him also almost disappeared. Gigi, half a mile away. A few small movements were particularly clear in this dead silence. Xiao Hua looked up and couldn't help but laugh. It turned out that the nascent souls that Immortal Du Yi and Shan Shengzi had just teleported out actually appeared near their bodies. However, at this time, the nascent souls looked extremely weak. Even their figures were somewhat transparent and dim. The rings in the hands of the two nascent souls were also gone. Presumably, it was the buzzing sound that could shatter the golden core that caused the two nascent souls to suffer such heavy injuries. It was also the buzzing sound that blocked the teleportation of the two nascent souls. It even sent the two nascent souls to their bodies. Immortal Du Yi and Shan Shengzi's nascent souls didn't dare to stop in front of such a power of heaven. Immediately, the two people's bodies emitted a faint brilliance again. Each of them took out two magic weapons to protect themselves. They actually had the same idea as Xiao Hua. They were waiting for the end of the power of heaven. Immortal Du Yi and Shan Shengzi even had a strange idea at the same time. Since the dead Xue Xue asserted that Xiao Hua could escape from Kueha Sea, it seemed that Xiao Hua could really escape. But since Xiao Hua, a nascent soul disciple, could escape, then how could the two of them, who were genuine mid and late nascent soul cultivators, not escape? Accept your fate, Xiaohua sighed. Looking at the two nascent souls staring at him, he faintly smiled. His mind wanted to enter the space. Unfortunately, under the power of heaven, his mind couldn't enter the space. Xiaohua couldn't even hide his head in the soil. The abyss was still the same. The brilliance was gone. The three people fell deeper and deeper into Kueha Sea. They didn't know how deep they were from the sea. In the abyss, the two nascent souls were not close to Xiaohua, but they were also not far away. The nascent soul cultivators couldn't attack Xiaohua again, but they could still see Xiaohua's expression. It was just that this abyss was extremely strange. It was obviously in Kueha Sea. Even if the seawater fell, there was no water at all within a few miles of Xiaohua's group. The endless seawater actually went somewhere unknown. Strange, Xiaohua unconsciously thought of the last time he encountered the destruction of the Great Flag Reef in Kueha Sea. It seems to be different from this time. This is. Just as he was thinking, a whirlpool-like force came from Immortal Dew-E's side. It was like another invisible hand pushed him, and he was pushed to the left, less than 100 feet away from Xiaohua. Not good. Xiaohua saw the ferocious face of Immortal Dew-E and shouted in his heart, "I want to see how you can escape from me." Immortal Dew-E's leg still hadn't recovered. How could he not hate Xiaohua? Xiaohua was still bound by the yin-yang spirit talisman and couldn't move. In particular, his gold core was on the verge of collapse. How could he be Immortal Dew-E's opponent? At this critical moment, the suction force that had been going down suddenly turned horizontally. The three of them flew horizontally. Immortal Dew-E was caught off guard and was thrown far away again. This time, the suction force was even stronger. The three of them once again doubled their speed. Xiaohua looked up and saw a light that was smaller than the eye of a needle in the distance. It was extremely eye-catching in this pitch-black darkness. The three of them were simply too fast. Xiaohua had only just seen the light when it had already closed in. At this time, the light had actually turned into a space several hundred feet wide. Moreover, as Xiaohua flew closer, the space rapidly expanded. By the time Xiaohua and the others were truly sucked into the space was actually several hundred miles wide. Xiaohua felt as if he was an ant in front of it. Sumeru Buddhist formation? Xiaohua suddenly realized. There is actually a Sumeru Buddhist formation here? No. The power of this formation seems to be even greater than the Sumeru Buddhist formation we encountered in the Buddhist sect's ruins. If it isn't some Sumeru Buddhist formation, then it must be some other formation of the Tao sect that is even more powerful. Xiaohua thought. His figure was sucked into this space by the enormous suction force. Wong. An extremely loud and clear sound flashed by. The entire space was silent, but the blood in Xiaohua's body was about to boil. He knew that this sound had not disappeared at all. Then, in front of Xiaohua's eyes, a faintly discernible silver brilliance flashed and disappeared. Whoosh! The binding of the black and white talismans around Xiaohua's body was easily cut open by the silver brilliance. Xiaohua didn't have time to think too much. Another wisp of cyan brilliance flashed and disappeared. This time, the cyan brilliance actually penetrated Xiaohua's body and meridians. The magic power in his meridians that hadn't been activated was swept away by this brilliance. Huh, what is this? The cyan brilliance flashed and the entire space rippled with layers of gray ripples. These ripples came in circles, like huge growth rings on a withered tree. Xiaohua and the others were passing through these growth rings. Whoosh! The corners of Xiaohua's eyes twitched. His gaze had yet to break away from this strange fluctuation of gray when another hazy blue brilliance flashed. Xiaohua's body tightened, as if something was being sucked away by this brilliance. But what disappeared, Xiaohua didn't notice at all. 5 elements annihilation great formation. Not far from Xiaohua, Shan Zizhen's extremely shocked voice came. This voice was unexpectedly high and low in the gray fluctuation, appearing especially strange. How could this immortal world great formation be here? Sumeru Buddhist formation. Taoist Master Du, he seemed to have thought of something and also shouted in panic, This seems to be the Buddhist sect's supreme Buddhist formation before the ancient Buddhist sect was annihilated. Shuai, hearing this, Xiaohua was also greatly shocked. The names of these two formations were terrifying just by hearing them. How could their true power be measured by ordinary cultivators? At this time, the fourth red brilliance faintly flashed again. The reaction in Xiaohua's body was even more intense. Along with the brilliance, more than half of his Jindan was instantly extinguished, and the sword essence flowing in his body also inexplicably disappeared by 30%. Not good. Xiaohua suddenly thought of the situation when Sunset Island reappeared in the past. The white bones on the white bones, the rings on the white bones, and other things. Almost without thinking, he didn't even have time to put away the invisible golden sword in his hand and threw all the storage bags and spirit storage bags into the space. At this time, he almost forgot that his mind couldn't enter the space just now, but now he could. The last brilliance hadn't appeared yet, but Xiaohua and the others had already passed through who knows how far away in the gray fluctuation of the same growth rings. Fellow Taoist, you? How did you become old? Shan Xingzi and the others naturally didn't have time to kill Xiaohua and did their best to resist the power of the five elements annihilation great formation. At this time, Shan Xingzi suddenly cried out in surprise. Shan Xingzi, you also have white hair. Hearing this, Taoist naturally turned pale with fright. He raised his eyes to look at Shan Xingzi and hurriedly cried out. Xiaohua hurriedly looked at the two. Sure enough, the two middle nascent soul stage cultivators no longer had the same youthful appearance as before. A layer of white frost-like color dyed their hair and eyebrows visible to the naked eye. Moreover, the wrinkles on their faces seemed to be carved with a pair of knives. As the two passed through the growth rings, they were carved one by one. The passage of time, this gray fluctuation is actually another kind of great formation. Xiaohua suddenly realized. He opened his eyes wide and looked at the strange gray fluctuation in disbelief. These two nascent soul stage cultivators have a lifespan of nearly 2,000 years, but in this great formation, it turned into a flick of a finger. Thinking, Xiaohua raised his hands and looked at the invisible golden sword in his hands. He couldn't help but be shocked again. Strange, why didn't I change? Song of Time. Song of Time. This is the Song of Time demon formation. Suddenly, Taoist shouted as if he had gone mad. I heard Master mention it before. This is the most famous great formation that the demon race used to deal with my Tao sect in the ancient times. But before Taoist finished speaking, his face inexplicably dried up. His head, which was originally made of flesh, suddenly began to shrink and gradually turned into a skeleton with only skin. Swoosh! Xiaohua's crisis also came. An earthen yellow brilliance faintly flashed. Xiaohua didn't have time to check other places. He only knew that all the golden cores in the same nebula in his dantian had disappeared. Even the lightning core and the true inner core were as small as broad beans. Ha ha ha! Shan Shengzi laughed wildly. Song of Time. Great Meru Buddhist formation. Great Five Elements Annihilation formation. Who could be so generous? On the Dawn Rain continent, who could avoid these three great formations? This isn't anyone's generosity. It's an innate divine restriction. You, why haven't you changed? Suddenly, Shan Shengzi saw Xiaohua, and then looked at Taoist who had already turned into a skeleton in disbelief. He shouted even more incredulously, How can your lifespan surpass mine? But before he could say anything else, the hand he stretched out also withered. Along with the gray fluctuation of the growth ring, it immediately turned into white bones. The power of time, invincible. Seeing these two mid-nascent soul cultivators buried in this mysterious song of time demon formation in just a moment, Xiaohua also felt some sympathy. That's right, even if he didn't know why he didn't fear this song of time, he still had the five elements annihilation formation that he couldn't resist. Seeing the silver and green brilliance intertwining together flash again, the invisible golden sword in Xiaohua's hand immediately turned into nothingness. At the same time, this brilliance brought something that didn't completely disappear into Xiaohua's body. Then, It swept past his dantian. The already collapsed golden core and lightning core instantly disappeared, as if they had never existed. Damn it, Xiaohua laughed bitterly. Biting his lips slightly, he clenched his fists. He didn't know that the golden core and lightning core that had disappeared, and even the nebula that had been condensed by the golden energy from before, had been wiped out by the formation, left behind a bit of pitch black. That pitch black was now stained by the invisible sword, and was even more invisible. This was also the benefit of going through the third gold lightning tribulation. After a few waves of brilliance, Xiaohua's Buddha relic also began to collapse. The thousand Buddha diagram outside the Buddha relic was also completely separated into specks of light, barely covering the Buddha relic. In just a moment, the Buddha relic was almost as invisible as the golden core in his dantian. Under the Buddha relic, the black and white intertwining outside the Niwen Palace, the seal that was nimbly flowing from time to time was finally revealed. And as soon as this seal appeared, two faint black and white lines immediately rushed into Xiaohua's middle dantian. There, the same two-colored seal was flowing in a very regular pattern with the seal of the Niwen Palace. Not only that, in the five elements annihilation formation, Xiaohua's spiritual sense and Buddhist consciousness were also completely dissolved, and now he couldn't release them. Even Xiaohua's mind was somewhat muddled. Looking at the flickering five-colored brilliance in front of him, as well as the dense growth rings, Xiaohua laughed bitterly. He understood that this was probably the most dangerous place in this spatial passage, right? Sure enough, a swoosh sound entered Xiaohua's ears. Kacha, 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 kacha. 5 dazzling rays of light intertwined and simultaneously penetrated Xiaohua's Niwen Palace and the two black and white seals outside his dantian. Those two seals flickered at the same time. The black and white lines violently flickered, and in an instant, cracks appeared in the void, as if wanting to tear Xiaohua's Niwen Palace and middle dantian apart. Unfortunately, these powerful assassins couldn't escape from the five elements. What kind of power could they display in this five elements annihilation formation? But just as they were born, they were immediately annihilated by the five-colored brilliance that swept past. Xiaohua didn't know how many years he had been distressed, how many schemes he had racked his brains for, how many methods he had thought of, to break the seal without attracting the attention of the seal's owner, but it was broken so easily. Originally, he thought that the opportunity to break the seal was with the Shaman King in Ming Mountains. But, at this moment of life and death, at the bottom of the QC, where he had never dreamed of, in this so-called five elements annihilation formation, the seal was easily broken as if peeling off the shell of a boiled egg. This opportunity was something that Xiaohua had never thought of. As the saying goes, man proposes, God disposes. Of course, after the seal in Xiaohua's middle dantian was broken, a muffled dragon's roar came out from Xiaohua's middle dantian, and the heterogeneous true energy in his middle dantian was immediately annihilated by the five-colored brilliance. Even when the five-colored brilliance penetrated into Xiaohua's body, the sword origin and the 9 stars soaring sun flying sword were also annihilated. Only the trace of Xiaohua's primordial spirit and the 8 primordial spirit imprints gathered together and were forcefully sent into his middle dantian. But after the seal in Xiaohua's Niwen Palace was broken, a layer of golden light appeared outside his Niwen Palace. Under this golden light, the five-colored brilliance couldn't penetrate it. In short, because of the primal chaos energy in Xiaohua's body, he was able to escape from the Song of Time demon formation. But his Taoist, Buddhist, and sword cultivation were completely annihilated by this five elements annihilation formation. Completely annihilated, only leaving behind a little bit of foundation left from the tribulation lightning of 3 elements. Xiaohua's mind was also muddled by the Song of Time demon formation, and he was also injured by the five elements annihilation formation, gradually becoming muddle-headed. Looking at the gray fluctuating growth rings in the entire space, and the five-colored brilliance blooming like a lotus, Xiaohua's vision gradually blurred, and he gradually closed his eyes. However, just before he closed his eyes, he saw a 7-colored conch-like object that was strangely condensed not more than a foot away from him. Xiao Hua very habitually probed with his mind to put this object into his space, but when he touched it, his mind became dizzy and he fainted. He didn't even know if this object was put into his space or not. In the colorful space, a naked man with his eyes slightly closed, his slender body shuttled through the gray fluctuations of growth rings at an extremely fast speed. The five-colored brilliance also swept across the man's body. This kind of scene was very dazzling. After an unknown amount of time, the huge space gradually shrank. The five-colored brilliance divided into several rays, and the gray ripples also gradually slowed down. Woo! With a soft sound, the naked Xiao Huarua escaped from the space tunnel with a swimming fish. Outside the tunnel was an endless sea of blue water. Then, with a loud woo sound, countless bubbles emerged from Xiao Hua's body, carrying him towards the distance and high altitude. And behind Xiao Hua, the space became even smaller, finally turning into an existence smaller than the tip of a needle. Not to mention nascent soul cultivators, even tribulation transcendence cultivators and Mahayana cultivators wouldn't be able to easily find this place in this endless Gue he see, right? Xiao Hua floated higher and higher along with these bubbles, and at the same time drifted further and further away. Taoist Master Du Yi and Shan Shengzi, who were chasing him, had already turned into ashes. The dead Shui was right. If all of them went to the depths of the Gue he see, Xiao Hua would definitely be able to survive. But after this Great Meru Buddhist formation, Clear Song of Time Demon formation, and Five Elements Annihilation formation, where was this place? Who would be so idle as to set up these three strange formations in the depths of the Gue he see? And the power of these formations was so huge. Don't forget, in the millions of Ming mountains in the Huta village, what kind of cultivation base did Elder Wu have? He also didn't dare to rashly touch the Yin and Yang seals on Xiao Hua's Middle Dantian and Naiwan Palace. But these two incomparably powerful seals within these three formations were like yellow talismans being gently opened. Could it be that these three formations were like what Shan Shengzi said, innate divine restrictions? There were too many mysteries, too many unsolvable mysteries, too many dangers. This was also the reason why cultivators on the Dawn Rain continent rarely came to the Gue he see. -11. Chapter 3103. Xiao Hua, Shan Shengzi, and Du Yi had disappeared. One fainted, two fell, and no one knew. However, they were being chased by the early Yuanying stage Thunder Ming Taoist. Although Reverend Lei Ming's cultivation base was not as strong as the two mid-stage nascent soul cultivators, but with the help of the mystic technique of Imperial Thunder Sect, and under the condition that Xue Shueha had no choice but to cast a blood curse on the two nascent soul cultivators, he was barely able to keep up with the three of them from afar. The deeper Thunder Ming Taoist chased, the more frightened he became. He was not like Xiao Hua. He did not have much preparation and did not have many elixirs and other items. Seeing the increasingly thin heaven and earth spiritual energy, he hesitated. Even if he flew to the end and occasionally met some sea beasts, he did not dare to waste his magic power to kill them. The Yuanying in his body that was very sensitive to heaven and earth spiritual energy had already told him that the further ahead, the heaven and earth spiritual energy could no longer support the magic of a Yuanying stage cultivator. It could only consume the power of the Yuanying stage, and this was extremely bad news for Thunder Ming Taoist. However, the more serious it was, the more inconceivable Thunder Ming Taoist was that the two mid-Yuanying stage cultivators were chasing after Xiao Hua. Just as Thunder Ming Taoist was pondering whether to continue the chase, in the distant sea, an extremely small hole appeared, and waves of cryptic fluctuations came from the distance. Not good. An instinctive fear, a shock that came from the Yuanying stage, immediately arose in Thunder Ming Taoist's heart. What kind of heavenly might is this? Immediately, Thunder Ming Taoist had another intuition. Xiao Hua. That's right, that should be the direction Xiao Hua and the other two went. Thinking, Thunder Ming Taoist immediately released his divine sense, wanting to see what was going on. Unfortunately, not only was the location of the celestial phenomenon too far away, but the layers of fluctuations in the air also destroyed Thunder Ming Taoist's divine sense, making it impossible to reach. Forget it, Thunder Ming Daoist thought for a while, then gritted his teeth. This is also I's final limit. Xiaohua, if there is no more news of you, I will also be powerless. While speaking, Thunder Ming Daoist gathers his magic power and flies towards that direction. Unexpectedly, the celestial phenomenon was extremely powerful. Wave after wave of strange vibrations not only blocked Lei Ming Reverend's divine will, but also limited his magic power. Even his nascent soul was restless because of an inexplicable fear. It was as if this fluctuation could kill a nascent soul cultivator at any time. By the time Reverend Lei Ming arrived at the location of the celestial phenomenon, everything was already gone. When Lei Ming Daoist had just appeared, countless tiny vortexes had spread out over tens of miles to hundreds of miles, with tiny bubbles bubbling out like boiling water. However, in the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, there were no longer any abnormalities. The sea surface was calm, and the sea breeze blew from time to time. What a tranquil sea! If not for Lei Ming Daoist's suspicion, who would have thought that the famous nascent soul cultivator, Wu Ming, who had fought a great battle with a Dao sword cultivator, was buried here? Lei Ming Daoist did not dare to return like this. He was clear that even if he left some divine will mark here, under the unpredictable storms of Kueha Sea and the extremely thin spiritual energy of this world, he would be wiped out in a few days. Furthermore, Kueha Sea is so vast. Once he leaves, he may not be able to easily find this place again without a divine will mark. Therefore, Lei Ming Daoist once again lingered for a few days, until he could no longer find any abnormalities. During this period, Lei Ming Daoist naturally gritted his teeth and used the secret technique of Imperial Thunder Sect. The result was exactly as he had expected. There was no trace of Xiaohua. Everything had vanished like smoke. Sigh, although I could not catch up previously, but at least I know that Xiaohua is in front. At least there is a trace of hope. A trace of hope. Lei Ming Daoist sighed as he raised his head, looking towards the extreme east. He even released his divine will for over 100 miles, but did not find any abnormalities. He muttered, "Now it's all good. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust." The sea is also the sea of destruction. A nascent soul cultivator suddenly rose into the sky, but before he could even emit a brilliant light, he immediately fell. What a tragedy, what a pity. My Imperial Thunder Sect. At this point, Lei Ming Daoist finally understood Master Qianlaizi's mood that day in Great Thunder Palace. There was no other reason. In front of the mysteries of heaven, human strength was just an action. Man can conquer the heavens. That was a lie. Xiaohua. Lei Ming Daoist looked at the sea beneath his feet that had some waves, and then at the sky that had some dark clouds and muffled thunder. He knew that another storm was about to come, and he definitely could not stay here any longer. He sighed. Since the first time this old man met you in Thunder Accumulation Cave, this old man has once again sent you off. It can be said that we are fated to meet. Your background is unknown, and your cultivation is also hard to fathom. This old man does not know if the information sent by the sword cultivators of Huan Country is true. However, this old man still hopes that you are the true disciple of Imperial Thunder Sect that this old man was thinking of. Now, sigh. At this point, Lei Ming Daoist sighed again, unable to continue. Since Xiaohua had already fallen, even if Master Qianlaizi had some thoughts of protecting Xiaohua, this kind of protection no longer had any meaning. It was impossible for Imperial Thunder Sect to let a living Xiaohua, a living nascent soul nameless return to Sky Thunder Peak. Then, would Master Qianlaizi still protect Xiaohua? Even though Lei Ming Daoist did not like this kind of ending, he also understood that Imperial Thunder Sect was unable to face the doubts of the other sects of the three countries regarding Xiaohua. Imperial Thunder Sect was unable to explain the various strange things about Xiaohua that the sword cultivators of Huan Country had mentioned. A living nascent soul, no matter if it is foundation establishment or qi refinement, is still more valuable than a dead nascent soul. Xiaohua, you also do not blame Lord Sect Leader. You have already left, but Imperial Thunder Sect is still here, and so is Myriad Thunder Valley. Facing the reality, Lei Ming Daoist felt powerless in his heart. He casually said a few words, circulated his magic power, and gradually left. Within this region of several hundred li, lightning flashed and thunder roared. Lei Meng Daoist was afraid that he would not be able to find the burial place of the three nascent soul realm cultivators. However, before Lei Meng Daoist could fly out of Guihe Sea, a lightning sound transmitting talisman flew in front of his eyes. When Lei Meng Daoist used his divine sense to take a look, he could not help but be shocked. What? The ones who died in the bamboo forest were Xue Xue and Wu Ming? How is this possible? When I was ordered to leave Imperial Thunder Sect, Wu Ming seemed to have not come out of seclusion yet, and that Xue Xue seems to be a Foundation establishment disciple. How could they have arrived in front of me? Or perhaps, Lei Meng Daoist listened, raised his eyes and looked ahead, and said thoughtfully, after Wu Ming came out of seclusion, he did not stop at Myriad Thunder Valley at all, and directly rushed to the bamboo forest with Xue Xue. Only then could they have arrived in front of me. But how could they know where Xiaohua flew to? Unfortunately, all of these were only guesses. Xue Xue had no choice but to leave. Xiaohua, Daoist Du, Yi and Shan Shengzi had all died. How could they know what had happened? As for why Daoist Du, Yi and Shan Shengzi were chasing after Xiaohua, Immortal Ascension Sect and Immortal Music Sect might be able to give him an answer. However, what was the status of Daoist Du, Yi and Shan Shengzi? Could the two sects easily answer? Even if Qin Lazy wanted an answer, it would not be good to ask, right? After all, the two's cultivation had surpassed the sect masters of the two sects, and they no longer asked about the affairs of the two sects. If Qin Lazy wanted to ask, he could only point the spearhead to Shan Shengzi's master, Feng Shu of Immortal Ascension Sect, and Daoist Du Yi's master, Xianlu Sect's Fanshin cultivator Chan Ximiao. Two Fanshin cultivators. Lei Meng Daoist knew that this was impossible. In fact, it was just as Lei Meng Daoist thought. When he returned to Great Thunder Palace and reported this matter to Qin Lazy, Qin Lazy's face was gloomy, and he said that Xue Xue went to Myriad Thunder Valley as soon as she came out of seclusion, and Wu Ming of Myriad Thunder Valley also just came out of seclusion. After talking with Xue Xue for half an hour, he immediately left a jade slip and left Imperial Thunder Sect with Xue Xue. As for the jade slip, Qin Lazy also looked at it, and it only contained Zhuo Minghui's last words, and a sentence to Wu Qing. Wu Qing, Daddy is gone. Although Daddy feels guilty towards you, Daddy knows that there are some things that must be done. What Daddy wants to do, you may not know in your whole life. Perhaps no one in Dawn Rain Continent will know. But Daddy must do it. When you grow up, you will naturally understand. Alas, yes, there are some things this sect must do, although I don't want to do it. Qin Lazy sighed, and returned the jade slip to Zhuo Minghui, and said, Xiaohua was expelled from Imperial Thunder Sect. There is no need to hide anything. From the moment Xiaohua left Sky Thunder Peak, no matter if he was a terrifying phoenix or a nascent soul nameless, everything about him has nothing to do with my Imperial Thunder Sect. Yes, subordinate understands. Lei Meng Daoist bowed and replied, As for Myriad Thunder Valley, as I said before, it still exists. Qin Lazy looked at the pale Zhuo Minghui and waved his hand. Wu Ming has done a lot for my Imperial Thunder Sect, and he left, but we can't let him be bitterly disappointed in the underworld. Yes, subordinate understands. Lei Meng Daoist's heart warmed, and he turned to Zhuo Minghui and said, Everything about Xiaohua from now on has nothing to do with Myriad Thunder Valley. If anyone provokes us again, they can come find me. Yes, disciple understands. Zhuo Minghui only knew about the news of Wu Ming and Xue Xue's death now, and she really didn't dare to believe it. Moreover, until now, she didn't know why Xue Xue and Wu Ming died, and why Xiaohua died. To them, this matter is just a secret. -11. However, she knew that it was just wishful thinking. Although Xiaohua was formidable, facing two middle-stage nascent soul cultivators, there was absolutely no possibility of him surviving. Furthermore, the two middle-stage nascent soul cultivators had already fallen without any news. How could Xiaohua possibly survive? Darling Xiao, Fairy Hong Xiao muttered, this concubine knows that she was wrong. I missed out on the good time to spend with you. Although this concubine was somewhat demanding of you, this concubine truly loved you. However, now that I saw Xue's love, this concubine knew how shallow I was. For your survival, Xue was willing to give up her life. This concubine asked herself, if this concubine had made a choice in that instant, this concubine could have done it too. If I was like little sister Xue's forbearance, this concubine would definitely not have done it. This love is the love that husband deserves. This concubine is ashamed of her inferiority in front of Xue. However, husband, since you have left, the words that this concubine said to you are still valid. This concubine is husband's wife in this life. In this life, I will only have darling Xiao as my husband. Today, this concubine swears a blood oath that I will never talk about dual cultivation with anyone else. Finished speaking, Fairy Hong Xia's ice phoenix body flew out, wailing in the ice valley, crying blood. Xiaohua, Xue. In a secluded valley in Xuanlei Palace, there were two small mounds at the bottom of the valley. In front of the mounds stood Sun Shu, but her tone was very indifferent. Senior sister knows that if you were in the sky, the two of you would be birds flying together. If you were on earth, the two of you would be intertwined branches. Senior sister is very jealous of the two of you. Regardless of life or death, you can be together. With each other's company, how can there be loneliness in this world? Loneliness has always been intentional. A faint voice came from above the valley. Junior brother Qian, you've come? Sun Shu did not seem to find it strange and did not raise her head. I thought that you still bore a grudge against Xiaohua and would not come to pay your respects. How can I bear a grudge against junior brother Xiao? Qian Diheng's figure flew to the bottom of the valley, his white Taoist robe the same as Sun Shu's. Your heavenly Thunder Palace disciples, as well as the many disciples who returned from Sky Patrol City. Aren't they all complaining about Xiaohua? Sun Shu glanced at Qian Diheng and said coldly, I seem to have heard someone say it himself. Of course I said it. Qian Diheng did not deny it. I even said it in front of the sect master. But I know even more clearly. Someone needed me to say it. I also did get that messaging talisman from Xiaohua. And that messaging talisman indeed. There's no way to explain how it ended up in my hands. Since you understand. Sun Shu still wanted to say, but was stopped by Qian Diheng. There are some things that you don't have to say out loud. But there are some things that you have to say even though you know it's against your heart. You know better than me how Xiaohua is. I know better than Xiaohua what you're thinking, but why don't you say it out loud? Sun Shu blushed slightly and shook her head. There are some things that are better left unsaid. Yes, there are some things that are better said than not. Qian Diheng also nodded. Although this Qian has said those words, it is still better than not saying them. Even though I said it out loud, I still respect junior brother Xiao. Not to mention that he's a nascent soul cultivator. Even if he's a spirit-severing cultivator, he's still my junior brother Xiao. There's no mistake in this life. Saying this, Qian Diheng walked to the two mounds and knelt down. Although there were no tears in Sun Shu's eyes, there was a kind of sadness in them. After a while, Qian Diheng got up from the ground and looked at Sun Shu. He said indifferently, although Xiaohua left, the Imperial Thunder sect still has me. If you have any problems, you can find me. Saying this, his figure flew into the air and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Damn it! How could this guy? Zhang Qingxiao, who had experienced Xiaohua's life and death several times, could not determine whether Xiaohua was dead or alive. Holding a jade slip in his hand, he frowned and looked at the night sky. My Devil Realm secret technique can determine whether you're dead or alive. Unfortunately, I don't have your blood essence. I don't even have a strand of your hair. Zhang Qingxiao scratched his head, but then his eyes lit up and his figure immediately turned into wind. I forgot. You still have Zhang Lu'er by your side. Junior sister has Lu'er's life jade slip. If you die, Lu'er will naturally not be alive. But if Lu'er is no longer here, what should junior sister do? Zhang Qingxiao was probably the first one to realize that Xiaohua was not dead, right? As for Sword Domain, in a sword palace, Juxia, who still looked like she was in her 20s, simply looked at the sword slip in her hand with disdain. She sneered, Daoist Xiao, that's Daoist Xiao. It would be strange if he could die. Not to mention 2 Yuanying stage cultivators. Even if there were 10, he would still be fine. Saying this, she casually threw the sword slip in her hand on the table on the stone wall in the distance. Then she opened her mouth and saw that there was a blue ripple in the sword palace. Layers of sword chi rippled in the sword transformation pool like water waves. As Juxia opened her cherry mouth, a wisp of sword chi more sparkling than crystal rushed into her mouth from the sword transformation pool. After half a cup of tea's time, the hedgehog-like sword chi around Juxia withdrew back into her body. Juxia frowned and slapped her forehead. Something that looked like a nascent soul flew out from her forehead. It was a little pink fox the size of a fist. However, the little fox's tail shook slightly. There were 4 of them. Behind the little fox, a series of afterimages were fanned out. Swift. Juxia sat down cross-legged and opened her mouth. The pink chi rushed into the air. The little fox let out a GG sound and opened its mouth. The pink chi entered its mouth. With a light boom, the little pink fox suddenly expanded. Its 4 tails were especially obvious. Pa, 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 pa. 4 consecutive sounds rang out as the little fox's 4 tails swung. Inexplicable, shattered phantoms appeared from the little fox's tails and gradually gathered together in front of Juxia's eyes. When Juxia saw it clearly, she couldn't help but frown. Although these afterimages were broken and incomplete, she could clearly see that they were the surging waves of the sea. In all the afterimages, besides the waves, she couldn't see anything else. Strange, Juxia's face flushed red. She patted her hand, and the 4-tailed little fox entered her body. She frowned and said, "It seems that Xiao Hua really went to the Kuai-He Sea. However, my divination technique can't see whether he's dead or alive. If Xiao Hua is dead, it's impossible to create this illusion. But if Xiao Hua isn't dead, I should be able to see some traces of him in this illusion. I've never encountered such a situation before." On the Dawn Rain continent, people related to Xiao Hua were more or less thinking about whether he was dead or alive. But no one would have thought that Xiao Hua would really appear in front of them one day. That attitude was so high that it made people look up to him, and so inconceivable. However, this time was so long ago that it was enough to make people forget. -11. Chapter 3105. Everything in the Xiaoyu continent seemed to have nothing to do with Xiao Hua, whether it was hatred or longing. Right now, he was in the depths of the sea, where the waves were surging. His eyes were tightly shut, and there was no expression on his face. He was neither sad nor happy. His entire body was slightly curled up, and his hands were clenched into fists. His body was moving up and down along with the waves. Sometimes, he would be thrown high into the air, and sometimes, he would be smashed into the bottom of the sea along with the waves. But no matter what, Xiao Hua's body would always float back to the surface of the sea very quickly, just like a bird feather, neither flying nor sinking. After an unknown amount of time, the peaceful Guihe Ocean began to bustle with noise and excitement. Previously, there were only a few fishes, but now, there were gradually more and more fishes. One after another, fishes that were much bigger than Xiao Hua rushed out from the bottom of the sea and cheerfully chased each other through the air. One after another, water pillars shot out from the top of these fishes' heads. At the same time, the cyan scales on these fishes' bodies began to shine under the scorching sun and speckled with splendor. The fishes flying in the air let out a cry, and dozens of them flew down. They originally wanted to get close to these fishes, but the water pillars that shot up hit their wings. GG. Some of them nimbly landed on these fishes and grabbed several scales. Some of them were hit by those water pillars and fell into the water with a puci'd sound. But as soon as they touched the water, these fishes flew up again, and with a JGA sound, they flew high into the sky. Occasionally, a loud hong sound would be heard, and an enormous black fish that was several dozen zhang long, like a mountain, would rush out from the azure water and rush into the air. Following that, waves of water would surge out. That rumbling sound was actually emitted from the mouth of this enormous fish. This enormous fish's body actually appeared extremely quickly, and in an instant, it would bump into those careless fishes. Poo-pee-oo muffled sounds were heard, and many fishes were actually killed into blood, and slowly slid down from the scales on the fish's body. Hong long long. The enormous fish frightened the fishes, and once again landed on the surface of the sea. Following that, waves of water soared into the sky, and like an earth-shattering water curtain, it once again knocked down many startled fishes. The sky that was originally filled with fishes swimming and birds flying was instantly shattered. What's more, after the giant fish swam away, it was followed by tens of thousands of small fish. These small fish were sparkling and were even smaller than a thumb. Thousands of sparkling lights were like quietly sprinkled mercury on the surface of the jade-green water. It was so beautiful. The seabirds that had been scared away by the giant fish were now chirping excitedly in the air. One by one, they swooped down without any regard for their lives. Every time they touched the surface of the sea, they would immediately fly higher. Their slender beaks were holding small but plump fish. The chirping of the birds became louder and louder, and the sky became even noisier. The seabirds that came out of nowhere covered the surface of the sea within 1,000 feet. Every one of them was in a hurry, but in an orderly manner, they all participated in this rare feast. Specks of spirit fragments, splashes of water, and layers of bird feathers. It was a scene of flourishing vitality. When there were fewer little fish, there would naturally be fewer seabirds. The sky slowly turned dark again. Following the unknown undercurrent in the sea, behind the tens of thousands of small fish, Xiaohua floated along with the waves. A few seabirds that had arrived late had yet to taste the feast of the sea and sky. Later on, after being contaminated with primal chaos energy in the endless void, it returned to its original state and became as heavy as an ordinary body. And now, he slightly balanced himself, and his body was once again lying flat on the blue waves. Even his hands were stretched behind his head. The only thing missing was a green foxtail in his mouth, and he looked just like a shepherd boy in a mountain village. Life is always this cruel. As soon as you see the dawn, as soon as you see a trace of hope, your pride will be smashed to smithereens. Xiaohua looked at the dusk sky. The white clouds and the dogs, all dyed in blood red, and his heart was very desolate. Xiaohua slightly pondered in his heart. Ever since he woke up in the dawn rain continent, until now, fate had been playing tricks on people. From a first-level chi refining cultivator, how many twists and turns had he gone through? How much bitterness had he suffered? With great difficulty, he cultivated to the early golden core stage. With great difficulty, he fought for a great reputation in the great battle of Tao and Sword. But due to a freak combination of factors, he was unexpectedly expelled from the Imperial Thunder sect. Losing his sect wasn't particularly painful, but what made Xiao Hua's heart turn cold was that the frost bamboo he had always placed his hopes on actually wanted to plot against him. What kind of Buddhist expert was this? With great difficulty, he came out from the ruins of the Buddhist sect, but he was actually chased by two middle nascent soul stage cultivators. Although Xiao Hua had always been worried about this pursuit, he had always been thinking of ways to avoid it, but he didn't expect the momentum to be so fierce, far exceeding his ability. Although he used the Phoenix illusion, and Shueishuaha had no choice but to give up their lives for him, he was still captured. If it weren't for the inexplicable threefold formation in this Kueha Sea, he definitely wouldn't have been able to escape from the hands of two middle nascent soul stage cultivators. Dozens of years of cultivation were like children in their eyes, and the affairs of the world played tricks on people, although Xiao Hua escaped with his life. But all of his cultivation was crippled. The golden core that he had painstakingly condensed had already turned into a trace of flowing water, falling into this Kueha Sea and disappearing without a trace. Not only did the cultivation of the Tao sect turn into nothing, even the Buddhist sect's Buddha Saraira had almost disappeared. If it weren't for the 10,000 Buddha painting in the ruins of the Buddhist sect, perhaps the Saraira would never be seen again. Of course, within this threefold formation, The yin-yang seal that was like a fishbone in Xiao Hua's throat was also easily broken, no longer leaving behind a trace of hidden danger. Moreover, Xiao Hua's soul cultivation was also not affected by these threefold formations. It could also be considered a great fortune amidst misfortune. Let's see how bad it is, Xiao Hua thought, and was about to use his divine sense. Unfortunately, the Buddha Saraira was gone. How could his divine sense still exist? Xiao Hua couldn't help but smile bitterly. Forget it, Xiao Hua's mind fell into the space again. The space naturally wasn't affected by the threefold formation. That green-robed Xiao Hua sat cross-legged in the sky while holding the sword gourd, his hands occasionally forming hand seals. Cough, cough, fellow Taoist. Xiao Hua's mind, which had turned into a jade archive, coughed and asked, "Is everything all right?" Green-robed Xiao Hua didn't even raise his head, as if he already understood everything that happened, and replied, "This space is independent of the Dawn Rain continent. It won't be affected by the formation outside." The netherworld sea was turbulent, and gusts of netherworld wind blew in the entire space. Where did the vitality come from? There was only the power of death emitted from the black sun. On the contrary, the netherworld lotus and the netherworld bamboo were still faintly shining. The stone statue was also flickering with demonic fire, constantly burning Zhang Xiaohua. Looking at the netherworld lotus, Xiaohua's heart ached again. He clearly knew that today's situation, for Xue Xue, would be many times better than her cultivation achievements. But subconsciously, he still hoped that the lively, competitive, and possessive Xue Xue who saw things she liked would be alive and standing in front of him. -11. Chapter 3106. Good fortune, good fortune. Jade Archive. Xiaohua couldn't help but sigh. He took a few more glances at the netherworld lotus before leaving the netherworld. Refining a low-level pill was very easy for the Jade Archive Xiaohua, but when Xiaohua took the pill, he discovered that he seemed to have made a mistake. Yin and Yang seemed to have an effect on living spiritual objects, but it didn't have an obvious effect on this spiritual grass. Or perhaps Xiaohua didn't notice this effect. The effect of the newly refined pill was no different from what Xiaohua usually took. Of course, Xiaohua wasn't too depressed despite his disappointment. His cultivation had always been very difficult. Even if he cultivated from the beginning, it would only take a few decades. Xiaohua had now made a decision. No matter how thin the heaven and earth spiritual energy was in this Kueha Sea, he would only choose a small island and lay down a formation. He wouldn't ask about anything else. He would raise his cultivation to late nascent soul stage, or even spirit severing stage. Thinking about the cultivation on the Dawn Rain continent, apart from a very few periods of seclusion, Xiaohua spent most of his time busy with karma and couldn't cultivate in peace. Therefore, the improvement of his cultivation had always been slow, like a child staggering in the mud, and every step he took was extremely difficult. It was also because of this that Xue Xue and Wu Xian fell. Every time Xiaohua thought of Xue Xue and Wu Xian, the two people closest to him on Dawn Rain continent, his heart would feel like it was pierced by a needle. Now he already knew that his enemies were not only the three nascent soul stage cultivators from Xi, but also the two old monsters whose cultivation had reached spirit severing stage. How could he repeat the same mistake and return to Dawn Rain continent without full confidence? After taking a few medicinal pills, Xiaohua slowly activated his cultivation method to refine the medicinal pills. At the same time, he also activated the dragon transformation art and celestial body bestowment technique. He crazily absorbed a large amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy from the surroundings of Kueha Sea. At first, it was very small, but then a strong gale gradually formed. After Xiaohua cultivated for a moment, he suddenly discovered with astonishment, that's not right. The deeper I fly into Kueha Sea, the thinner the heaven and earth spiritual energy is. Why is the heaven and earth spiritual energy here far richer than before encountering the triple formation? Although it still can't compare to Dawn Rain continent, it's enough for cultivation. Thinking of this, Xiaohua was immediately overjoyed. Since the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was rich, he naturally had more confidence in recovering his cultivation and advancing to the nascent soul realm. Maybe we should find an island. Xiaohua couldn't use his divine sense at this time, so he naturally looked up. Unfortunately, the waves were boundless in all directions, so how could there be any land? Do you want little yellow and the rest to come out? Xiaohua's search was fruitless. Instead, he thought of the two little fellows. But these two fellows finally took the initiative to cultivate. Isn't it inappropriate to disturb them like this? Swoosh! Right at this moment, several silver shuttle-like little silver fishes passed by Xiaohua's surroundings. Quite a few silver fishes even blankly bumped into Xiaohua's body. In the air, the previously dissipated sea birds gathered once again and flew towards Xiaohua while shrieking. Strange. Xiaohua turned his head strangely, only to see that behind him, more than 100 zhang away, something that looked like a brown flower branch poked out of the sea and rushed towards Xiaohua's direction. Looking at the bottom of the flower branch, there was another several zhang of dark brown scales. Wasn't that another rather large sea fish? Great! Xiaohua couldn't help beaming with joy when he saw it. Truly a mount sent by the heavens. It's better to let the two little fellows cultivate. This Xiao can handle such a small matter by himself. Immediately after, Xiaohua lay down on the ground again. His figure drifted along with the waves, but he released his divine sense. When the large fish got closer, only several zhang away, his figure suddenly flew up and easily crossed the sea surface, landing on the back of the large fish. Good boy. This fish should be several tens of zhang long, right? Xiaohua's figure landed very gracefully. Although his Fei hadn't recovered yet, he still had ethereal steps and other martial arts, so he wasn't afraid of being discovered by the large fish. However, the place where his feet landed was precisely the dark brown scales, which were even larger than his feet. Looking at the fish's spine, which was even larger than a house, Xiaohua was stupefied again. Roar! Seemingly aware of the slight discomfort on its back, the large fish shook a few times. An indescribable huge force was born from the scales, forcing Xiaohua to have no choice but to jump up. Fortunately, the large fish quickly swam towards the east and didn't make any other abnormal movements. Seeing that the large fish was stable, Xiaohua also sat down cross-legged. In order to not disturb the large fish, he didn't activate the immortal body bestowment technique. He only took a few medicinal pills and used his heart to refine his true qi in his body, condensing his true essence and slowly recovering his Fei. That large fish seemed to be looking for food and also seemed to be migrating. In short, it swallowed many fish along the way as it swam towards the east. Xiaohua leaned on the large fish's back, where the flower branch was located, and it was quite comfortable. Unfortunately, the good times didn't last long. These peaceful days only lasted for several dozen days. Although the large fish was still swimming towards the east, its body sank into the sea. Xiaohua was helpless. He could only jump down from the large fish's back and continue to soak in the sea. At this time, Xiaohua already had some true essence in his meridians, but it was still somewhat insufficient to activate the flight technique. Of course, this true essence could be used to refine the flight talisman. However, after refining the flight talisman, he would have to spend true essence to activate the flight talisman. Who knew when he would be able to find an island in this vast sea? Xiaohua also wasn't in a hurry to refine the flight talisman. He only focused on taking medicinal pills. In less than 2 days, another large fish passed by Xiaohua's left side, but this large fish was swimming towards the south. Xiaohua didn't say anything further. He landed on the large fish's back and followed it towards the south of the Kueha Sea. After several dozen days like this, the true essence in Xiaohua's body gradually increased. Only then did he have the confidence in his heart. He flew up from the large turtle shell that he had just changed into. He activated the wind escape technique and flew towards the east. His movement didn't matter, but the large turtle immediately sensed it. With a so sound, it shrunk its neck and dived deep into the Kueha Sea. It was unknown how many years had passed before it dared to come out of the water again. Although he already had enough true essence to support the flight technique, Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He continued to take medicinal pills while activating the dragon transformation art and the heavenly infusion technique to speed up his cultivation. Needless to say, the heavenly bestowment technique was already much stronger than before. Without the seal on the middle dantian, the dragon transformation art was obviously much stronger than before. What was special was that when the dragon transformation art was activated, it was relaxed, smooth, and cheerful. Xiaohua really enjoyed it. It was far from the previous oppressive and obscure feeling. Sure enough, as Xiaohua thought, the further east he went, the denser the heaven and earth spiritual qi became. Although the change wasn't particularly big, the amount of heaven and earth spiritual qi entering Xiaohua's body increased by a lot. Xiaohua could keenly sense it. However, although he had flown for more than 10 days, Xiaohua's feet were still ice-cold seawater. He didn't see any reefs or islands. Looking at the dark clouds in the distance that looked like they were dancing ghosts mixed with a dozen hurricanes rushing towards him, Xiaohua couldn't help but complain inwardly. He had trained in the Kueha Sea before and knew that the Kueha Sea was mostly filled with violent winds and torrential rains. In these 10 days, he hadn't encountered any storms. It was truly rare. He naturally also knew that this huge storm might not have any effect on him, but the true essence that he had painstakingly cultivated would be completely exhausted once again. It's best to find a place to shelter from the rain. Xiaohua hurriedly looked around. There seems to be an island over there. Far to the east, at the edge of the torrential rain, Xiaohua could vaguely see a few dark spots under the monstrous waves. These dark spots were mixed with some colorful mottled spots. It was somewhat eye-catching. Unfortunately, Xiaohua currently only had his eyes and soul consciousness. His soul consciousness couldn't reach far. It was difficult for it to be of much use. Immediately, Xiaohua urged his flying technique and hurriedly flew towards those dark spots. Swoosh! Just as Xiaohua approached those dark spots and recognized that they were some reefs that were exposed above the sea surface, the majestic rain and the strong wind blew over. The pitiful Xiaohua was also unwilling to use the golden light protecting his body. With a sweep of his soul consciousness, he found a rather large cave and went in. Although the wind and waves were big, the rain poured down like a waterfall. It had nothing to do with this abject cultivator. Xiaohua even sat cross-legged in the somewhat damp cave and raised his eyes to look at the gloomy sky. He said to himself with extreme regret, "Alas, this storm is still a bit weak. There isn't even any heavenly thunder. It's really boring." Soon after, Xiaohua closed his 5 senses, urged his heart sutra, and entered secluded meditation. This secluded meditation lasted for more than 10 days. When he used the sun-shrouding art, his soul consciousness improved and Xiaohua woke up again. He wasn't in a hurry to come out of the cave and hurriedly checked his cultivation. When his soul consciousness entered his lower dantian, he couldn't help but be stunned. As early as when he was in the 5 Elements Annihilation Great Array, Xiaohua already knew that the golden core he had painstakingly spent more than 720 dry separation pills and absorbed countless gold qi and sword qi from the sword mound was completely destroyed by the Great Array. He had no choice but to cultivate from the beginning again step by step. But at this time, in his soul consciousness, it wasn't like he had imagined. There was no trace of the golden core at all. On the contrary, at the location of the golden core, where the 2 lightning cores were at the front and back of the golden core, and where the tens of thousands of golden cores were originally condensed from gold qi were at, there were traces invisible to the naked eye but detectable by soul consciousness. But these traces seemed to be different from the golden core from before. Previously, in Xiaohua's lower dantian, that golden core was the location of true essence, and all the magic power came from there. The 2 lightning cores circled around the golden core one after the other, and traces of lightning rushed into the golden core. All the other gold qi cores didn't produce true essence or magic power. But now, the traces of these golden cores were no different from the traces of the golden core. At least, Xiaohua's soul consciousness couldn't see any difference. So much so that if Xiaohua didn't know that these were traces of the lightning cores being erased, he wouldn't have been able to determine anything special from the traces.